All right. I think I'm online here. Oh, yeah, I see people. I see people. Okay. All righty. Let's get this going. I'm going to make sure these other streams are running because I'm doing simulcast or multicast or whatever you call that. All righty. Those who don't know, I do this from two separate channels. I have a mirror channel if you're not familiar with it. All right. It's because the channel gets taken down because, just how controversial energetics is. It's just for the most bizarre random things. Sometimes they'll decide to take it down for, a week, 2 weeks. I think the longest it's been is a month. That was pretty devastating. Yeah. So those things happen from time to time. But welcome. And give some folks some time to join. I only gave maybe 10 to 20 minutes notice here tonight on this one, but I've been kind of doing it about the same time each night. All right. Well, trying to think of how to get this going. Maybe I'll do something that's not of this exact material just to make this relevant for later so we're not just sitting here for a couple minutes. Let me think here. I know what to do. All right. Energetics. I'm going to do some energetic supplementary material from the same playlist that's in the same realm, I think. Let me think here. Spirituality and science to cost. Oh, yeah, there we go. You know something? I want to keep this all in order, though. Not sure what to do right now because I don't want this to be irrelevant for another time, but I don't want to deviate too far away from the actual core energetics material. But I've got some really good articles here on like bioplasma, spirituality, and science, and the human cost of denying the existence of the biofield. Things involving religious beliefs and energetics. What else? Yeah. I'm going to stick with the material. Actually, I don't want to deviate too far from it because it actually takes an hour and a half just to get through these, and maybe I should just get it started. But part 9 is those who are a little bit more of the, wanting to see like the documentation and the Defense Intelligence Agency things and learn how human brainwave has been, uh, like brainwave jamming and event related desynchronizations and things of that nature. And, those unfamiliar, I got into studying energetics because I was curious about human impact of electromagnetic fields. And I was running into documentaries like resonant frequencies of resonant beings of frequency. I always screw that one up. Was a really good one that I saw that kind of created some pause in me a little bit and made me think as a former engineer and a person that, well, look, I'm still, I guess you could say, kind of a technician engineer. I'm just using my skill set for something different. Um, and But I used to design cell towers. About 75 or so of them I designed in the Northwest of the United States, Washington and Oregon, mostly rural areas. And that's where some of this material bridges into, because I kind of show you how I sort of unconsciously or subconsciously wound up placing a tower that kind of fit within this Fibonacci spiral of energetics out in this area in Oregon that is just seems to be supercharged with this these energy lines where they all cross, and that's out in Enterprise, Oregon, Joseph, Oregon area near a place called Wallowa Lake, and it was very much like informational dowsing that led me to a lot of those energy lines. It was very strange how it all fit together, but So that's my background. I did about almost 2 decades in total doing wireless design. I started when I was really young. So if you're wondering how I achieved that, that's why. I basically got started in the wireless industry right out of high school. It was at a time when you could do that. You didn't really need to have a college education. You just had to show that you were, maybe smarter than average and, could learn on the job. And so I started as a technician and I did installed phones and things. And then I, moved into doing things like in doing like maintenance installation of base stations into cell towers, and then like microwave paths, like maintaining the actual equipment in the cell towers. And then I transitioned into being a guy that was like an optimization engineer. I mean, like the exact job I had was the "Can you hear me now?" If you saw those commercials, the people that just go around testing the network. I did that for a while, and that's called system performance within the wireless industry. And so I did that for several years. And then I kind of moved in and graduated and moved up into doing like cell tower design. And that's where you're literally just saying, okay, well, there's coverage that doesn't have, there's no coverage in this town or over in that part of town. And I'm the person that would have like said, all right, when I recognize that people need those towers or they're making requests for them, and in rural markets, that's usually how it works, folks. People ask you to do it. You're not trying to go around convincing anybody of anything. Usually, these small communities would come to our company and say, "Would you please put a cell tower here?" And that was my experience in the industry. So it's a little bit different than I think a lot of people perceive the way things go within those things. As far as like, how do we make those decisions as engineers, and what are the intentions of the engineers? A lot of people are very, very misperceived about how that works. And the reason why I've done some of the material the way that I have is because I could just tell that if I let the people in the quote truther community handle this alone, they always go into conspiracyville and don't really evaluate it properly. And I feel like this way about a lot of things, about different groups that people make assumptions about, religions or esoteric societies or whatever, only because I become so aware of how misperceived people can be, and how they can just really be jaded by their experiences and not really understand like the actual intention of the individuals that are involved with those decisions. And so that's kind of what a lot of this is about as far as part 9 goes, helping you understand what convinced me as a cell tower engineer, technician, whatever, to shift gears a little bit on what I was placing my energy into, and do something different with my time. And so you're seeing the culmination of all that time I've spent outside of the wireless industry has amounted to this work. Um, I left it all behind. I mean, I have to tell you guys, being in the wireless industry is pretty much, it's a ticket to success. There's no question. You can make a lot of money. I'm not trying to convince anybody here, but I'm telling you that I had some exceptionally good contracts where I could just go someplace, work 6 months, make a ton of money, and leave. And but it's felt wrong for many, many years on so many levels. It's just felt completely wrong to me. Internally, I felt an internal struggle about it, and I couldn't really understand why. Um, and again, I don't know what the right solution is or what the answer is, but I just knew that I had to look into, what is the human impact? What are people's perceptions versus reality? That kind of thing. So I know the room is a little bit light in numbers right now, but I want this to be relevant later. So I'm just going to plug away. Whoever the couple people are here, hey, I'm glad you're here, and welcome. And I think I'm just going to get this thing going and start the presentation then. And I guess if folks need to whatever, they can. All of this you can find in part. If what I would encourage you to do is just, if you join. Well, how am I supposed to do this in hindsight? I guess it doesn't matter. But I was like, if you're going to join, but no, I mean, well, hey, welcome there, Geo. So, anyways, yeah. So we're gonna just get this thing going right now, and that way I don't waste any time with this. But let me see here. I'm trying to think of the best. Oh, you know something? I don't know that this audio thing. Let me get this. I have to make sure the audio is right. Let me see how this audio plays before I make that decision, because all right. Okay, I got to change it because the audio is not playing right. Hang on. Oh, wait, that might be me.
Okay, everybody, building on the energetic.
Oh, it is going to work. Yes. Okay. I wanted this because, like, guys, I've been trying to make this screen like to where you don't have to look at like the web browser and everything like that. But I hadn't even thought to use this spare monitor that's been next to me this whole time, so I could actually make this full screen so you could actually see the whole thing. So, hey, it's going to look a little bit better tonight, 3 times the charm. But tonight, just so you know, guys, part 9 is mostly focused on, CIA, DIA documentation. It's like a deep dive into it for this first 30 minutes that we're going forward here, okay? But if you're more into the trinity of human energy, biofields, how we bridge these concepts into something that's a little bit more typically left to the Gaia Mother Earth groups, that that doesn't resonate well with me, and I know it doesn't with a lot of other people. The fake new age thing, that's always associated with energetics, because as far as I can tell, energetics just proves the existence of God in a more traditional way, in less the loosely whatever way. That's all. I don't know. I'm not a big new age person. It pushed me away from this type of research because I was so put off by some of the folks that would communicate this information. I felt like they were kind of going out of their way to make it like abrasive and discordant, and not something that a person with a more scientific brain or an engineering background could appreciate, understand, or care about. And I actually want to see people that I used to work with, for example, look at this material, even if they first think I'm kind of a idiot or something like that, like, whatever, he's one of those guys doing that thing about cell towers. Well, not really. I'm actually going to show you something that'll actually, if you used to know me or work with me or something like that, and you come across this material, I think if you just watch it all the way through, it'll blow your mind. I mean, and then I would say watch like resonant beings of frequency, the documentary, in tandem or before or after, and it'll make you question things a little bit. It'll make you say, wow, am I doing the right thing? Or is this the right way to go? Or is there some other way we can do this? You might actually question it, the way that I did. And again, that leads into a whole new series of understandings about the way the world works. And for me, it's just brought me closer to things that are more spiritual and helped me become more centered the more I study it. And to me, that's really the essence of bioenergetics and psychoenergetics, within the field of energetics. That when you begin to sort of, it's such an enlightening thing, I guess. It gives you enlightenment to really get it, because you start to appreciate life in all of its forms, and you start to respect life because you can measure its energy. When you begin as an engineer, like not even thinking about these things, and how energy is pushed around this way and that way, or radiates outbound, and then suddenly, like, you kind of go, wow, this all matters. Like, it's a huge revelation what it does to you. And there's a little bit of crisis of consciousness. Sorry to be whatever, but guys, I worked all day. I had a little nap, but I've got some black tea here instead of coffee. So I'm going to do my best to. I feel good though, so I think I'll be able to handle the whole 2 hours or whatever we're going to be doing here tonight. So with no further ado, we got several people in here now. I'm going to get it going. Okay. All right. So here we go. This is Energetics Part 9. And I'm going to give you a brief summary of this one, just so you have. Let me pull it up on the screen here. Why isn't that working? All right. Hang on. Bringing the mouse over here. All right. So the description of this one: in Energetics 9, I explore more of the Gateway Experience report that can be found on the CIA.gov's FOIA library, as well as Robert Beck's extremely low frequency ELF research, and how it all ties into a cellular phone safety study from 2007 that demonstrated a GSM mobile phone could cause disruptions in the brain. That's hemisphere synchronization. I don't suggest this one study is definitive evidence, but when you view the series of data points together, there is a common theme in the way all these things play into brain waves and our ability to achieve or remain in alpha state between 8 to 12 hertz. This is close to the Schumann resonance at 7.83 hertz. This report goes into the connection between human brain and the Earth's resonant cavity, which seems to act as a waveguide for bioenergetic communication. In this update, I placed the U.S. Army's 1983 Gateway Experience Report next to the 2007 Cell Phone Safety Study, then compare that against our Project Stargate research performed by SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation, in the 90s, involving event-related desynchronization, ERD, which is interrupting brain waves, and Robert Beck's breakthrough research from the 70s. Lots of data in this report, and I'll follow up with a supplement consisting of stills of all the full slides and reports if the audience would benefit from that. And here again, folks, you can, I'm not sure how well you can see that on the screen, but if you go into the description of part 9, you can go to my energetics playlist. You can get all the FOIA documents there. I usually do that in all of these reports. All right, so hang on. All right, so I'm going to start playing it now. And this is Energetics 9, and I will be back.
Topic. I want to talk about brainwaves and basically what was known dating back to 70s, 80s within our own government, military, what kind of research had been done, how it's been expanded since then, and what kind of studies have been ongoing about the effects of different technologies on our brain frequency, on our brain waves, our ELF, extremely low frequency, what sometimes people call their alpha state, their ability to meditate at the 8 to 12 hertz range. And so I put this picture here and showing, brain waves and longitudinal waveforms, because a lot of times people see something like this with a head and all the matrix grid and all this talk about a gateway experience, and they associate it with new age type nonsense like I would have. And what I'd like to tell you is that I pulled this straight from a U.S. Army report called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, dated from 1983. And it goes into great detail. I've quoted this in my last article on Energetics 8. So I want to build upon this a little bit to kind of demonstrate to you that, yes, that does look a little bit sci-fi and new age and that type of thing, but there's a real, concept involving how we interact with one another, how we perceive reality, how there's no solid matter, things of that nature, and that we're vibrational frequency beings, as it were. So a lot of this, some of this language that's co-opted by things that I think that I personally find a little bit off-putting, like new age things. I've found science that basically, I would say, validates a lot of the things that are contained in that, and that's why I want to provide more information to sort of say, like, look, you don't have to be within that group or adopt their value system or hang with that to understand these concepts. You really can just reference some of this documentation, which I'm going to leave all in stills at the end of this presentation, so you can freeze frame a copy on your own. Getting to that, I'm going to quote from the Gateway Experience report here. I already did before, but I think it's important before I start the discussion as far as what studies were done involving cellular phone technology or wireless phone technology. This is a study that I'm going to quote later on involving GSM. It's an older technology, but it's still relevant to the way electromagnetic frequency, the proximity of a handset to the human skull can affect your ELF brainwaves. So I wanted to talk about the actual numbers here first. I want to talk, I'm going to take from the brain stimulation quote here, part 9 of the report, where it says that the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is in turn cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located between it and the skull. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in a range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7.75 hertz. So this is getting into the concepts involving the Schumann resonance, as many people are familiar with. I've quoted that documentation many times in my material. You can go back through a lot of my previous bioenergetics research to look into that. But I wanted to move on to the next part of this that discusses more about frequencies in general. Because a lot of times you'll hear people say that we're resonant, we're beings of frequency, or we're resonant beings of frequency, and things of that nature. And it seems a little bit hokey and new age, which honestly, in as far as terminology goes, it does come off that way. But there's a certain degree of accuracy that you have to lend to it, really when you're thinking this through. Basically, just discussing how that you're at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to 15 hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the third power hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. Okay. So that when you go back then and look at that illustration, it doesn't really seem to be that new age, does it? It seems to be quite accurate when you look at this. The left hemisphere consciousness grid acts like the mind's computer software to reduce input from the right hemisphere to verbal symbols and concepts. And when you really study this and try to visualize it, and I added, by the way, the color to this. This was only black and white. I added the waveforms from some of the research that I was doing. So that's why I'm integrating this presentation here. And it says consciousness energy grid. So what I would challenge you to do, I guess, is to try to visualize these waveforms, longitudinal waveforms, and various spirals and coils, and try to visualize those types of things as you think through your own brain processes, that you have frequencies that are emanating, that are able to be received and are sent out, your influence upon others, what you do with your energy to others. The right hemisphere consciousness grid reduces three-dimension holographic image to two-dimensional go, no go. Sorry, that's been omitted. That was in the original documentation. I guess the copy was bad. But the point is that a lot of these times, these things are sounded like when they say that we kind of live in a matrix grid, or people try to hypothesize these things. Well, yes and no. Really, if you think about it, we're still vibrational energy. We're still energetics of some sort, right? We're still this energy mass of some sort that's interacting with other masses of energy, whatever you want to call that, whatever you perceive that to be, right? Whatever your belief system is. I think it all fits. So getting into that, like, what are the things that are out there right now that can impact everybody on as a whole on their physiological brain processes? And this is where you have to lend a little bit of credibility to people's concerns about cellular phone technology in general. I'm not even going to pretend that I can pronounce these people's names here, so I'll just leave this up here. I apologize, but the name of this study is called Mobile Phone Emission Modulates Interhemispheric Functional Coupling of EEG Alpha Rhythms. This is a brief slide. I'll just read it really quick. It says, we tested the working hypothesis that electromagnetic fields from mobile phones, EMFs, affect interhemispheric synchronization of cerebral rhythms, an important physiological feature of information transfer into the brain. 10 subjects underwent 2 electroencephalographs, EEG recordings, separated by 1 week following a crossover double-blind paradigm in which they were exposed to a mobile phone signal, Global System for Mobile Communications, GSM. That's a older iteration of existing technology, cell phone technology. The mobile phone was held on the left side of the subject head by a modified helmet and oriented in the normal position for use over the ear. The microphone was oriented towards the corner of the mouth, and the antenna was near the head in the periotemporal area. In addition, we positioned another similar phone, but without battery, on the right side of the helmet to balance the weight and to prevent the subject localizing the site of GSM stimulation and consequently lateralizing attention. I think that that's to suggest that they're trying to make sure that the brain doesn't just perceive the weight of the device in its assessment of your brain waves, or like the blocking potentially of an external source. So I think what they were doing was placing a dummy phone on one side that did nothing and an active phone on the other side that did something. So I think I might have mischaracterized that when I discussed it in other presentations. So I apologize. Moving on to this. In one session, the exposure was real, GSM, while in the other, it was sham. So again, the dummy handset on one, the real one on the other. Both sessions lasted 45 minutes. Functional interhemispheric connectivity was modeled using the analysis of EEG, electroencephalograph, spectral coherence between frontal, central, parietal electrode pairs. Individual EEG rhythms of interest were delta, about 2 to 4 hertz, theta, about 4 to 6 hertz, alpha, 1, about 6 to 8 hertz, alpha 2, about 8 to 10 hertz, and alpha 3, about 10 to 12 hertz. Results showed that compared to sham stimulation, GSM stimulation modulated the interhemispheric frontal and temporal coherence at alpha 2 and alpha 3 bands. The present results suggest that prolonged mobile phone emission affects not only cortical activity, but also the spread of neural synchronization conveyed by interhemispherical function coupling of EEG rhythms. Now let's go back to this visual. You can kind of see once you start to contextualize that and think about what they're discussing here about the hemisphering of your brain. And then you realize that our own government, within our own research, the things that we were acknowledging internally was that we are, sort of a vibrational frequency, beings, that this is a key element of how we process thoughts and how we interact with one another and how we perceive reality. I think you have to lend some credibility to people's concerns about technology. It would be foolish to do otherwise. And so that was something that was dated from the 80s. So a lot of people don't realize that this research continued on, and they were really trying to master it. A lot of this research moved on to like places that are typically, I guess you could say, assigned or blamed to it, which is like Stanford Research Institute. They're commonly quoted in paranormal psi phenomenon. But really, a lot of the staff from Stanford Research was, I guess, taken over, or rather, maybe, I don't know if they transferred, or I'm not sure what the story is, but a lot of them moved over to a lab that was a subsidiary of Science Applications International Corporation. I think eventually folded into the corporation as such. And a lot of that staff, I've downloaded tons of their documentation from CIA.gov's Freedom of Information Act library that's been declassified. So things that were around the 90s have been declassified more recently. So I have some of that documentation here because I commonly discuss it in my material and SAIC's role in all this. And they did one called, you can download from that, and I'll put all the document numbers inside the description here. It's called Significant Preliminary AMP Experimental Results of the Science Applications International Corporation. So just quoting really briefly to show you what they did. As part of the activity's external R&D contract, SAIC has been conducting basic research into the nature of anomalous mental phenomena, AMP. During fiscal year 1993, so again, this is the 90s, mid-90s, 3 significant experimental results were obtained. Although the data is still undergoing evaluation, preliminary analysis indicate that the results are considered to be a breakthrough nature in anomalous mental phenomena research. These results could significantly enhance our capability to perform our mission. Entropy experiment. Previous research by SAIC under the contract had identified a physical variable from communications theory that could be applied to anomalous cognition AC research to identify meaningful differences among target types and explain why all targets are not equally sensed by AC capabilities. The variable, called entropy, may be defined as a measure of the information inherent in a target. Laboratory experimental activities demonstrated a significant degree of correlation between AC success and dynamic changes in the target's entropy. This is the first time in the history of AC investigations that a physical variable has been correlated with any AC anomalous cognition activity. The potential value added of this experimental result to the Stargate program is twofold. Those not familiar, Stargate is pretty much always the big program that's associated with really the weirder psi phenomena. So taking a quick break from that, back into it. First, it should now be possible to pre-assess the information content of a given target so that taskings may be chosen which should have the highest potential for successful data acquisition. This should improve the overall quality of data gathered by AC. Secondly, if the information content of a target is known, then the difference in data acquisition from that target should be directly related to the skill of a viewer. It should therefore be possible to develop an objective method of assessing AC skills using these experimental results. Alpha desynchronization. It is an established neurological fact that a brain in idle generates alpha waves at approximately 10 hertz, and that these waves diminish significantly whenever the brain's idle state is interrupted by an external stimuli. EEG and electroencephalograph experiments conducted by Science Applications International Corporation seems to have demonstrated for the first time in AC research that reception of an AC signal by the brain does in fact interrupt the alpha rhythm in the same manner as would any other external signal. This is called event-related desynchronization, ERD. The potential value added of this experimental result is the potential use of ERD to improve AC functioning, analogous to the method in which biofeedback can be used to train a person to alter his physiological responses. This experiment demonstrated that changes in the electrical properties of one person's skin could be affected according to the intent of an isolated operator, and indicates that AMP can be used to remotely influence biological systems. Really consider what that amounts to, and think about what that really translates to when you're reading through this report. And I'm going to create stills of all this and put it at the end of my presentation here so you can read it on your own. But remember, we were studying how to interrupt that process, how to master that process. They talked about their mission. You know, this was a big deal, and it was all part of Project Stargate. You can look that up. Nearly everything that's related to remote viewing, psi phenomenon, telekinesis, anything paranormal that we officially acknowledged anywhere is going to be related to that. So now that you've seen a cell phone study that basically, you know, getting back to that, talks about how that particular GSM phone study demonstrated there is a little bit of interruption at the alpha 2 and alpha 3 states. So that's between 8 to 10 hertz on alpha 2, 10 to 12 hertz on alpha 3. Think this through a little bit. We're having to go back to the material a little bit and remember that we've already acknowledged that we basically operate as vibrational frequencies, and that this is the core element of that vibrational frequency is within that range. So yes, when they talk about their mission, this is the ultimate weapon, right? So to validate that, let's get into some research that pre-existed the governments and things, and was more related to Robert Beck, Bob Beck, I guess he goes by sometimes. There's a report out there called ELF, Magnetic Fields and EEG Entrainment. I'm not going to read the entire thing here, but I will include as many slides that I have from it for your own review. But I wanted to just read this first part because I think a lot of people don't give a lot of honest credibility to some of the concerns people have about the effects of frequency on the brain. What are the overall impacts of all this contribution of various frequencies into our environment? Are we studying it effectively? I'm not trying to make any claims of anything aside to say that, you know, I do believe that there's reason to be concerned, and that judging by all the information you've seen so far, this should really be something that I would hope would, you know, motivate you to look further into it and decide for yourself. So I'll start here. Clinical research indicates that somewhere between 25 to 75% of human and animal subjects may exhibit marked psychological sensitivity to extremely low frequency, ELF, magnetic and electrical fields. Brainwave entrainment can be demonstrated and electroencephalographically when subjects are in the vicinity of oscillations in the frequency range of approximately 3 to 20 hertz at intensities of below 100 nanoteslas. That's important to remember when you're doing measurements on your own. If you get an EM meter that's of a good quality, this is extremely good information to have for you, because you can actually set your EM meter to sweep between these ranges. So if you begin to take this information seriously and you're trying to understand the effects that it has on your body better for yourself, I would recommend you really take this material seriously, because Robert Beck is considered a huge authority on these things. ELF fields of 6.67 hertz, 6.26 hertz, and lower tend to produce symptoms of confusion, anxiety, depression, tension, fear, mild nausea, and headaches. Arthritic-like aches, insomnia, extended reaction times, hemispheric EEG desynchronization, as was discussed earlier, and many other vegetative disturbances. H and B field magnetic vector oscillations of 7.8, 8.0, and 9 hertz produce anxiety relieving and stress reducing effects, mimicking some meditative states. See how we've been talking about alpha state, the earth resonance being at 7.83 hertz, how when you reach that state, you can sometimes tap into that frequency. This report validates what we've been talking about here. And this, again, it just demonstrates it's not new. Okay, I'm not claiming any of this is. I'm just trying to get it all into a cohesive work of information here that people can actually understand and place together logically that doesn't take up too much of their time. So anyways, getting back to it, it has been speculated that frequencies in this range may be universally permeating clock frequencies or carriers on which mind or consciousness states can be impressed and interact with other life forms in the nebulous realms of ESP, psychotronics, distant healing, radiesthesia, and related paranormal but anecdotal phenomena. Coherent ELF energies have unique and interesting property of almost lossless propagation within the Earth ionospheric cavity waveguide, and attenuation of these signals due to distance from transmitter sites is negligible. So remember what we talk about, again, getting back to the Schumann resonance, the Earth cavity. What are you really doing when you're practicing astral travel, when you're experiencing telepathic communication, when you might be actually communicating with somebody who's passed on, those types of things? You're in the Earth cavity where the energy continues on. Really think this through a little bit. These things should no longer be considered esoteric or hard to believe. We should really be at a point where the science is there to place it all together into something cohesive, that you shouldn't roll your eyes when you see these things or hear about them. The established physics of radio propagation therefore suggests that vast geographical areas can be readily manipulated by transmissions of EM energy within the Earth ionosphere cavity waveguide. The accidental discovery in 1938 of the Luxembourg effect, by which a transmitter of relatively low power fed to an antenna array producing a circularly polarized signal, can piggyback to any pre-existing RF energy source and produce disturbances of the ionosphere at any frequency desired, which then modulates all other energies within that waveguide, is fully described in literature 40 years ago, but probably forgotten or overlooked by today's technologists. Very true. And I don't know if you heard about this, but there's been reports that I can't remember if it was like a Cold War thing where there was like an ELF wave that was transmitted from some high power, like huge antenna grid. And I think it took something like a year for it to circulate. Something like, how they determined that, I don't entirely know. But yeah, I thought that was pretty trippy, because it just takes, it wouldn't stop going. It would keep recirculating in the ionosphere, I think was the way it worked. So Bob Beck gives a little bit of his history here. I won't get into all that, but starting a little bit into here, he says he had the unique opportunity to make electroencephalograph recordings of the brain and wave patterns of a number of truly exceptional subjects in the U.S. and Hawaii who were famous or had demonstrated established reputations as psychics, healers, medicine men, dowsers, etc. And then I'll just quote reading from his perspective here. Since I had a wealth of personal contacts in both the scientific establishment and psychic underground communities, I was fortunate for the opportunity of meeting and being allowed to wire up and instrument a cross-section of sensitives from vastly different disciplines, ranging from charismatic Christian faith healers to an authentic Hawaiian kahuna, to practitioners of Wicca, Hex, Santeria, radiesthesia, radionics, seers, ESP, readers, psychics, etc., etc. A striking number of these authentic sensitives exhibited a nearly identical EEG signature when reporting that they were in their working state of consciousness, a state persisting from 1 to several seconds intermittently during the altered state of consciousness phase of the paranormal activity. The signal appeared to be an almost sine wave of up to 25 microvolts as read monopolar frontal to occipital midline and 7.8 to 8.0 hertz in the frequency or on the alpha theta borderline. Okay, discuss.
Really quick, I'm going to interrupt this very briefly, just so you understand here, folks, like radionics and radiesthesia. So that would be like what I'm experiencing if you were to go into this type of thing. That's consistent with what I got going on. It's the radionics, radiesthesia aspect of this. My interaction with technology. Again, guys, I used to sit inside cell towers for hours at a time, maintaining them. How do I say it? There's this hiving thing that goes on relative to human frequency, human brainwave, and these things, and the way you tune to things. And I would call it informational dowsing. There's something that's going on where I have some interaction with these towers as physical structures, but at a brainwave type level. And I can explain it the further we get into parts 9, 10, and 11, but that's part of why I got so fascinated by this, is because I knew I was experiencing something super weird and I was trying to figure it out. And I am a person that understands radionics better than average. I actually have a radionics, well, a series of radionics devices, but I have one that I just use to tune crystals, basic like white quartz or just really cheap, regular average type quartz, guys. Nothing really all that whatever. And you almost always find me with these three pieces of quartz on me. And I basically using radionics, I have a method through which I tune water and I tune crystals with water, my own DNA signature relative to Earth brainwave and human brainwave for myself. I tune it to myself. And that's because I have a belief that we're being knocked off of the organic Earth grid that is at 7.83 hertz, more consistent with alpha brainwave state. And that's part of my method. That's how I thought it all through. And I can tell you that with radionics in particular, I have experience with having zero electricity, okay, no electrical components except for my human body, where I placed my hands on a radionics plate and created a loop. And there was something about tuning the antennas relative to the numbers I had dialed that I just started to get some strange phenomenon at the same time, very personal in nature, and it was very benevolent. I mean, there was nothing bad about the experience at all. But when it happened, I was kind of like, okay, this is happening. This is really strange, but I know it's a thing now. And I'll get more into detail about that. So I don't want to interrupt this for too long, but I'm just trying to help you understand, like, that's where I'm at within this range of the psychic phenomenon. I don't claim to be psychic, but I experience anomalous cognition, anomalous mental phenomenon, things like that, weird aspects of that they refer to in these reports. I know about it, and when others are experiencing it, I'm in a state of believability if they meet certain criteria or they can explain it to me in ways that I'm looking for. Doesn't mean that I'm the gateway or whatever, the gatekeeper of that information, but like I kind of know the difference between a person that's experiencing it and doesn't. It's just based on my own experiences. I can tell by the way they communicate their synchronicities and other types of events that happen to them, or the reluctance to actually go full bore with saying like, well, okay, here's what happened. You can see them kind of being reserved a little bit, like, man, is anybody going to believe this? Well, I'm a person that will. I mean, more than average, but because it is a thing, and it really does involve Earth resonance relative to brainwave being very close. So back to part 9. I don't want to interrupt it too long.
The brainwave frequencies and the brain state you can be in, but also 7 to 8 hertz is within the Schumann resonance. That's the alpha theta borderline. So we've been talking lately about the Kundalini experience that some people in these communities discuss. The interaction with your pineal gland, the types of things that can occur when you experience the spinal energy combined with the pineal gland. When those energies meet, that theta, I think that's where the alpha and theta borders are meeting, and that's why that's such a relevant data point. And why things that merge these two energies, or whether it's a ritual practice or meditation or whatever, or energy work, that when a person achieves this state, I think that's what they're doing. They're just taking these signals, and it's just like it's just amplifying at a magnitude of whatever. Kind of getting back to the Army document. So when a lot of these things, like they'll make fun of them as concepts involving your brain frequencies and things like that. But I can assure you that there's a lot to this. So getting on to Bob Beck's report here, though. The serendipitous discovery was unexpected in that although the subjects were practicing opposing disciplines and coming from totally disparate teachings and viewpoints, and would barely acknowledge the existence or authenticity of practitioners outside of their belief system, they all appeared to be, quote, marching to the sound of the same cosmic drummer, unquote, when in an altered state of consciousness. So meaning, even though they come from different backgrounds and are practicing different things, he noticed that as far as the raw measurements, they all seem to be doing the same thing when they practiced whatever their quote unquote magic was, or whatever made them a mystic, or whatever gave their practice a little bit more of a paranormal element to it. So after replicating this observation a number of times at sites thousands of miles apart, the obvious question arose that if these exceptional people, unbeknown to each other, were falling into the same cosmic consciousness mode, what or where was a signal to which their brain waves became entrained? what was the drummer? Is there a clock or synchronizing signal presence? In 1952, physicist W.O. Schumann postulated mathematically that our Earth and ionosphere constituted a cavity waveguide whose physical constants and magnetic field would oscillate at a resonant frequency identical to the range of human brainwaves. In 1962, our National Bureau of Standards Division of Radio Propagation reported the actual physical detection and instrumental recordings of these signals. And as predicted, tracings were indistinguishable from encephalographic recordings from human brainwaves. This newly discovered phenomenon was dubbed Earth brainwave. Since there is a pronounced node in the Schumann resonance at 7 to 8 hertz, the question of possible EEG and ELF interconnectedness appears to be an irresistible area for investigation. I agree. So I'm not sure how much more I want to get into the report and everything, except I do want to get to the end of it here. There's a part that I thought was super interesting. It says, so he talks about how he wanted to go back and visit some of these psychics and everything and do more experiments. So I thought I'd explain one of them so you can kind of understand the dynamic of magnetic resonance, why the coil is integrated into occult work and esoteric things sometimes, and what it relates to as far as merging those esoteric practices into what they're actually doing in a scientific level with brainwave frequency, okay? Because a lot of these people use these coiled antennas, and it's something you need to be on the look for. The next effort at inducing psychic awareness was to place a 9-foot diameter coil of about 100 turns of number 28 magnet wire on the floor of the laboratory and expose subjects to the real-time magnetic replica of the highly amplified Schumann signal sensed at a remote location to avoid feedback. Results with individuals and groups experiencing this magic circle were dramatically successful. The third-generation investigations were extended to determine if subjects' brainwaves could be influenced by artificially generated magnetic oscillations of sine waves of low intensity and at specific frequencies within the range occurring naturally. Some subjects exhibited absolute brainwave entrainment over the range of approximately 6 to 14 hertz and at a signal strength of approximately 100 nanoteslas. Onset of phase frequency lock on average from 1 second to 4 seconds from the time of switching on the artificial ELF generator, and would sometimes last for the duration of the stimulus, usually 10-second episodes. Pretty interesting. One subject displayed absolute entrainment when he was placed inside a triple-shielded magnetic iron and triple electrostatic Faraday cage. The artificial ELF stimulus was originating from a pocket-sized battery-powered device positioned outside the shielded room and 12 foot removed from the subject. Tuning the device over a wide frequency range caused subject's EEG to exactly follow the stimulus. So how interesting is that? So like in that controlled environment, they would synchronize to it. After demonstrating the neurological responses of sensitive individuals and doing preliminary mapping of subjective states as reported for various specific frequencies, defined to 1/100th hertz on a digital frequency counter attached to the ELF generator, experiments were undertaken on a broader scale with totally unaware subjects, such as customers at local coffee shops during rush hours. This obviated the variables of suggestion, expectancy, or hypnosis. Anecdotal data amassed suggested that a pocket-sized transmitter at power levels of under 100 milliwatts could drastically alter the moods of unsuspecting persons, and that vast geographical areas could be surreptitiously mood manipulated by invisible and remote transmissions of EM energy, electromagnetic energy. Tests were rapidly abandoned after dramatic proof Tests were rapidly abandoned after dramatic proof because of ethical considerations, meaning they obviously knew that they couldn't go around turning these little transmitters on and making people lose their minds, so they rightfully stopped doing that. It is well known that naturally occurring Earth ionospheric magnetic oscillations will vary slightly in frequency. Monthly, full versus new moon, and indefinite cycles related to sunspot activity. This may well explain observable full moon craziness, since both theory and laboratory tests prove that magnetic H-wave shielding is impossible at these psychoactive frequencies. Even with the highly sophisticated multiple iron or mu metal shielding, it can be speculated that ELF signals can be a powerful potential weapon with global capabilities in physiological warfare. the wavelength of an 8 hertz signal is 22,159 miles. I feel the test should be undertaken with a number of remote ELF sensors that can be made directional in order to establish.
Guys, that part I just mentioned about it can be speculated that ELF signals can be a powerful potential weapon with global capabilities in psychophysiological warfare because the wavelength of an 8 hertz signal is 22,159 miles. All right. Now, think about that because what we're, I think, experiencing in the United States and in many other parts of the world is a psychophysiological warfare matrix of sorts where there is acceptable, allowable forms of this behind the scenes. It may be in entire neighborhoods or regions. People are kind of used as like a lab or test of sorts because this is all very easy to achieve through exploits in public works. So within the United States, public works would be things like your plumbing, your electricity, things of that nature, infrastructure, things that are handled within a central, point underground mostly. And so as new neighborhoods are being built or old neighborhoods are having renovations done, it's really not outside the scope of reality. And it's not conspiracy theory because I have, in fact, investigated this phenomena. And I have found in multiple locations extremely low frequency manipulation, brainwave manipulation, things that would be consistent with, artificial hiving. And I've become more and more aware over the years of the numerous methods through which this can be achieved. But never forget that one key aspect of this research, okay? Because it's everything to the trinity of human energy. Yeah, there's the weaponized form of it, but remember, the wavelength of an 8 hertz signal is 22,159 miles. That means effectively that when you emit a brainwave at that signal, there's a plasma, a biofield, a bioenergetic signature that transmits on that 8 hertz signal from your brain that goes up through your chakra system, pings against your pineal gland, and then you send out the bioplasma into the biofield where it merges with other biofields and other people that are similarly doing the same thing. This is why you cannot contain the human experience. This is why that no technology is ever going to completely override it because we are the source signal. It is in with us. See, we're creating the ELF as a collective hive mind, as a global collective hive mind. We're all basically, contributing to this 3D matrix via plasma. We process the universal plasma field through our mind, hearts, and loins, and every other part of our chakra system. It's all about what motivates us to do things on a day-to-day basis, what makes us, ask a man or woman out, whatever your thing is there. It's the thing that basically makes all of us, why do you go to work? Why do you go on dates? Why do you whatever? It's all basically because we're forming this structure together, and that's the free will aspect of the universal plasma field. Our individual motivations integrate with the universal plasma field. We share experiences with the people that we ping our pineal glands, hearts, and everything else to the closest. And then our biofields merge, our ideologies are exchanged, our ideas are exchanged. And then sometimes through that exchange of ideas and words and thoughts, symbols, whatever it is, then we begin to manifest things into physical reality. Everything begins this way. When people meet in a conference room, they call them project meetings or whatever else like that. Well, what happens as a result of those project meetings? I remember this because that's how it all began. We would meet in a room every week when I was a cell site radio frequency design engineer. We would talk about all the towers that we wanted to build, and then every week make incremental progress in actually building the towers. So it went from just talking about it in a room to vibrating into physical resonance. That's just what we called the construction of the tower. But do you guys get what I'm saying here? The brainwave is everything. It's just literally that you have an idea, it merges with another idea, and then you begin doing all the free will parts using the God source universal plasma field. This is the connection. That's it. All right. And then you go out and build things. You make roads, you make towers, you make buildings, men and women make babies. I mean, you see what I'm saying? That's all of it. But remember, at its inception, it is an idea. Everything, that's where it begins. The minute you think of it, the minute you begin to merge that thought with other thoughts, you have brought something into physical resonance. You just have the basic parts of it at the beginning. You're starting to form the blueprint, the architecture plans, but it's all there. And that's why stating your intention, orating your intention always has value. I don't care if you're by yourself out in the middle of nowhere. Speak your intention, say it or just think it. It doesn't really matter, but it's okay. It's always okay. And I would say that it just adds more vibratory frequency power to it when you say it out loud. That's why it's such a powerful thing just to say, like, okay, maybe I'll just stand out here and I'm going to say what I want, or I'm going to sing a song that makes me feel good. And eventually the emotional response that you have in that is attached to your biofield, and it finds others that are thinking and feeling similarly. They merge, and whether you even know it or not. And that's why all psychic phenomenon is based on that premise. That's why no Faraday cage blocks out psychic ability. There's no Faraday cage that can say, like, well, I can jam brainwave. Nope. When you want to entrain ELF to a human brain, there's no cage, there's nothing that can really contain it. So think about that when when as we're asking ourselves, what are we? What is this world we're surrounded by? It all boils down to this. So
Established by triangulation the sources of these recently detected man-made disturbances. So he's just providing some recommendations in this report, and you can read through the rest of it if you like. I think that that's most of the relevant material that I wanted to cover in Bob Beck's report. So I'm going to add slides to the end of this report here for everybody, but just to kind of summarize everything, I think what you should do is basically kind of go through this information a little bit. And again, I'm going to, in the exact order that I went, I'm going to put it all on slides at the end of this presentation, just for your consideration as an objective observer, as a person who may, happen upon this information and say, like, what are you talking about with this cell phone nonsense? Or maybe you're just a person from whatever, I don't know. But I feel like this should bridge the gap of information between maybe people who are, legitimately, um, intuitive, can channel, are psychics, things of that nature. It should validate what they're discussing. It should validate both their ability and also why it's important for certain groups to have studied how to interrupt that, and why people who have psi ability could potentially be singled out or manipulated specifically because they have these abilities. You see, if they can be discredited or placed in a program where they're not allowed, out of a certain informational loop, they can just be used indefinitely to experiment on this exact method. And if a person has enormous psi ability, you can understand why they would be just the best research topic for a person outside of their awareness. A lot of times they don't ask for permission to do this, and so that's one of the reasons why I wanted people to both really take this information in so that you can sort of like really evaluate why certain people that you may have thought are, might have been a little bit psychic or something along that lines. You may want to listen to them if they tell you that they've experienced some other things that might have involved people disrupting their privacy or getting into their lives, manipulating their perceptions and things of that nature, because it's very important, I think, a lot of times for them just to get, well, I'm not going to say it's important, but it's obviously like they're always looking for a person who's not aware of what's going on. So you see what I'm saying as far as a blind test? And there's too much information out there now that can draw correlations to both the psi phenomenon, what's going on with cell phone technology, how it desynchronizes the brain at times or can interfere with the hemisphereing of the brain. We have reports from our own Army dating back from 1983 that demonstrates that they believe that the gateway experience, the hemisync, the hemisphereing of our brains is a legitimate thing, that we are vibrational frequencies, and that we have this core frequency that this operates at, that some of these technologies have demonstrated disrupt. The reports are there. You can see the numbers yourself. If these are correlations that I shouldn't draw, that's fine. I'm just telling you that as a person that was in the wireless industry for a long time, once I saw this grouping of information all put together, this is what I personally find compelling, and that's why I'd like to share it with you today in my energetics research. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I appreciate your time.
hang on, folks. All right. Energetics 10. Hang on.
Everyone.
Almost there. No. Be quiet, Gabe. All right. Okay. The next one is part 10. So if you have questions about part 9 or you want me to expand on anything, feel free to chime in while I'm reading the description of part 10. And then before we get into that, I'll answer it. I know we're a little bit lighter on the participation tonight than average, but it is Monday after all. And I was doing the other ones on the weekend. So, and pretty late. This is late over here. So I just want you guys to, hang on really quick. Ask away if you have anything. Otherwise, after I read this, I'll probably go right into part 10. In part 10, I discuss how the extremely low frequency emissions of the human brain combined with vibratory resonance of language and thought forms co-create what we perceive as reality. What you feel and think affects the earth grid, and it's not something I say because it feels good. It's just science. I discuss the meaning of 33 as used in pyramidal structures relative to locations like the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico, Bosnian Pyramid, the Altai region of Russia relative to Nevada, and how Washington, D.C. aligns with Moscow. How do so many different locations line up so precisely with one another when they are sometimes thousands of miles apart and constructed hundreds, even thousands of years apart? This became very real to me and not just coincidence when I found many were lining up specifically to allow Lake Oregon, home of Chief Joseph, a famous Native American chief of the Nez Perce tribe. How did the events centuries apart have this many connecting points aligned at 33, 330 degrees, and 303 degrees on top of the standard north, south, east, west alignments? Again, you have to sort of see the material before that makes any sense. But all I've tried to point out to people is this whole obsession with, drawing negative attention or association to the number 33 is very short-sighted. It's not understanding the game. It's not understanding the game of psychoenergetics and archaeometry. They're always trying to add, I would say, negative energy to things that actually have positive intention, or, again, to obscure the meaning of the original 333, 303, 33 thing. So as many times as they can do things to kind of troll people a little bit and kind of go like, they killed 33 people at this false flag, or, oh, of course it would be 33 victims, or of course they said it was at 3:30, or of course all right, fine, guys, I get it. But you got to get past that. And then once you see this material, you'll kind of understand why they do that. Like, how did the number 13 become bad? How did any of these numbers become, quote, negative or bad? It's just enough people threw the suggestion out, and then they've learned that they can tap into that fear just by sending it out and transmitting it, getting you to negatively associate to something that they themselves receive the bioenergy from. And it's the trick of all the television stations, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, all of them are doing this. All of them are doing this. The more you give them your attention, the more they succeed at doing it, the stronger they get, the more influence they have. You can see that. That's just the most obvious, direct connection to it. We've given them our influence. It was hijacked. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming us for it. I mean, we're born into this. That's why a lot of my material, I coin Exodus MK Ultra. This is our exit out of this false reality. It's understanding how it works, understanding the games of the controllers and why they go to such great lengths to program intention, negative intention specifically into so many things. Why is there so much deception? Because to them, remember guys, to them, they all understand this intrinsically. They don't see lying to you as even lying as well. They know it's lying, so I'm not going to let them off the hook. They see it as reality manifestation, giving them power once they get you to perceive events a certain way. I don't care if it's just tricking you into a war or lying about some homicide that didn't even happen, and then getting everybody to go over and over again, like, oh, did you hear about Gabby Petito? Did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about that person? Guys, I already know what that one was about. I mean, it's trippy to me, though, that over and over again, people don't have they don't ask themselves, wait a second, Why is the media so focused on that one case involving that type of crime, but they ignore so many of them? Because they always present you with the false reality and ignore the real thing. There's all these people out there that could really use the media's help to get attention and awareness around certain issues or certain injustices. They are nowhere to be found. They're only in these rare pockets out there of people that, the real media doesn't even show interest in me, like this material. They kind of like, yeah, whatever. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll take a little piece of that or accept that part of it, but we're never going to let you talk over here because you'll reveal the game. Yeah, I'll reveal the game, guys. That's part of what all this is about. I'll tell you exactly how it all works. But again, we're so programmed to always say this group's doing this at this number. It must be that. It must be that. So when you see me use 33, it's because I know what it actually means. Okay. And yeah, guys, I learned about certain things from Freemasons, and I don't think that they deserve to be scapegoats of every freaking thing that happened in the world. But I also don't assign positivity to and glowing rainbows to everything that they do either. Do you see the difference? There's people that do good things with this knowledge, and there's people who do bad things with this knowledge. People that are in environments of secrecy, they will tend to exploit that secrecy, plan things in private, and then you have, quote, conspiracies that actually occur. So yeah, guys, it's not like your fear or your suggestions in that direction are completely unfounded. Of course that happens, but just dig deeper past it. Think of it in, what I'm saying, guys. That's all. I mean, again, I think we have a pretty intelligent audience here. Like Corey, they understand what I'm saying. So, and I know Tina does and things like that. So, anyways.
Everyone. I wanted to get back into the topic involving energetics here, using something that's kind of personal and I guess you could say experiential as an example. I spent a lot of time in my career. I was 20 years in the wireless industry before I left it. And when I did, I started to use a lot of the knowledge I had from that industry to do research involving maps. I was specifically studying the concept of ley lines, energy lines, or what some people call matrix grids. These are effectively energized Earth energies. That's the wrong way to put it. Matrix These grids. Are lines that follow a specific trajectory around the Earth that are charged with energy. What does that mean? Some people call that energy orgone, for example. That's one way you could talk about it. These are things that you can measure because there'll be fluctuations involving extremely low frequency and other types of signals. And these are all measurable signals. There's also things that are called life meters that you can measure this with. So these are tangible, provable concepts. Okay. I didn't used to believe in these things. It wasn't until I really took the time to study it that I realized there are called life meters that you can measure this with. So, and I was really getting a lot of reminders of it lately. Specifically, the power of faith. You can measure this with. So, you could say love. I was really as an energy source, comparative to the extreme emotions of hatred and trauma. And one of the examples that helped remind me of this was in my work experience. I used to design cell towers. For a while, I maintained them also, and I also did optimization. But specifically, I was doing design for about 7 years, meaning that I had the software that I would run and that I would actually decide, where antennas pointed and how tall the tower was going to be and things like that. And one of the last projects that I worked on while I was still doing that job was in an area called Joseph, Oregon, near Enterprise, Oregon, as well as an area called Wallowa Lake. I talked a little bit about this inside an interview I did on the Basis project. There was a song that kept on repeating in my head, and I didn't understand entirely where it came from. I mean, I kind of do, but it's effectively where I had this rhythm kind of going where I was thinking, Mars, Mars, hum, hum, will allow a wake. Mars, 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 hum, hum, will allow a wake. And I don't know why I couldn't get this out of my head. But for some reason, when I kind of hummed along to it and I thought about it, it just kind of brought me this sort of internal peace. And it has kind of a Native American tribal rhythm to it. It's like the kind of thing you would almost see them marching and, on the earth and dancing around and things like that. It just felt like that to me. And so I was studying the Fibonacci sequence relative to some more negative events in our country's history, like the Zodiac crimes, which appeared to be anchoring, I guess you could say, sacrifice and murder to the Fibonacci sequence by using the numerology of the Fibonacci sequence and the patterning of the Fibonacci sequence to perform ritual sacrifice. I don't want to go into that topic right now, but it's necessary to help people kind of understand why I believe so much, I guess you could say, in the power of demonstrating faith and love and feeling love for one another, and what a powerful force that is in the universe. That it's more than just something that you're sensing and feeling, it's an actual energy. It's a measurable, tangible energy. It's a How is that tangible and measurable? Well, your brain waves. You have an EEG, electroencephalograph, that you can measure that with. There's also devices like life meters. There's all kinds of different equipment that can effectively measure emissions of what some people, or like Wilhelm Reich, for example, called orgone. And some people, and I'm not sure I entirely agree with this, would classify things like positive orgone radiation as being more of a loving energy, deadly orgone radiation as being more of a, I guess you could say, a negative energy. But I feel like that's oversimplifying it. And I think that a little bit of that is um, our inability to see things as more clockwise, counterclockwise, forward and backward, but in the sense that these are all, I guess you could say, necessary energies. Competing, well, not competing energies. It's just the way we structure our reality. You hear me talk a lot about spheres of influence and spherical grids and circular grids. It's because your brain and each hemisphere emits a waveform, and you have a pattern that's emitted that's the product of your two hemispheres of your brain, which forms the vesica Pisces. If you're not familiar with that concept, look it up, or I'll provide a slide for it. But it looks a lot like a DNA coil. Some people associate it with the Jesus fish, if you're familiar with that symbol. And I was thinking about it in terms of the weird things that I was experiencing, where there was all these strange synchronicities to my information. Um, Things like you're running an angle from one place to the next, and it turns out to be like your birthday or the birthday of somebody that you love or care about. Things like that. That was happening to me. I was finding pyramid structures around the world and studying ancient pyramids and their alignments. Where are they facing? I was using my map experience to find out where do the edges of the pyramid point towards. When you run a line from those pyramids, where do they go to? So some of my research has landed me not only in places like Egypt, where we all know that there's pyramids, but places like the Bosnian Pyramid, the Pyramid of the Sun there, Teotihuacan, I always screw that up, in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun there. And learning more from people, other researchers, for example, that have basically been telling us that there's alignments. And I know a lot of people know this already, but there's alignments to the sun and the moon within the solar system to these pyramids. And so, again, some people kind of mock that or make fun of it, but in all actuality, it's what I'm learning is it's the only true science that's worth knowing, and it involves energetics, the interaction between our thoughts, our feelings, and how that affects everything around us, not just each other's behavior, but events. It actually structures events and structures reality. I learned in my experience, in my, I guess you could say, in my pulling documents off of the Freedom of Information Act library involving energetics, that there's quite a number of people who are in the school of thought that there is no solid matter, that what we exist in is a perception. I've now learned that that's basically the truth, and I can explain it in more detail in more articles than I already kind of have. But it's really became super obvious to me as I was, as you can see in the slide here, I was studying places like the Bosnian Pyramid, houses that I lived in that I'm aware were on energy centers where there was charged energy and energy lines. Places that I had visited, like Portland, Oregon, for example. I used to go hiking with somebody that I cared about deeply quite often, and we would go to different parts of Portland. And I learned that some of these areas that we were drawn to organically were energy centers. They were charged with energy. They had They were sometimes former volcanoes, places like Mount Tabor in Portland, Oregon. Um, there's there's an area where I got engaged at one time called Hug Point. I found a pyramidal structure there. It aligns with things in ways that I can't explain. And then out at Wallowa Lake, an area where I spent a lot of time just on the soil and on the ground doing research for designing a cell tower. But I also spent time there, with a coworker that I also admired and respected quite a bit, and we just had a lot of good times. We enjoyed what we did. Maybe not always aware of how energy affects people. That's a whole nother topic. I don't design cell towers anymore, and I left the industry just because I've been concerned about emissions of orgone relative to the way certain technologies work. And what became really obvious to me that this is all something that's tangible and real was that as I was performing these alignments and pyramids that were clear across the world, like the Bosnian pyramid, it was really, really strange how there was alignments from a pyramid like that to the area that I spent time in, like Wallowa Lake. It wasn't just that one. It's that my childhood home that's hundreds of miles away from there also aligned with Wallowa Lake. There was peaks and ridges and mountaintops and lakes that were aligning with places that I was born or spent a lot of time in. In addition to that, I've also been studying Freemasonry not within it, mind you, from a distance. I don't join anything like that. And I don't have a problem with them or anything like that. I just study it from a distance without judgment at a purely energetic level. And I just started noticing that quite a few of these Masonic lodges, specifically the one near Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which is another place where I grew up, also had alignments to Wallowa Lake. So, there struck me as something really strange here that not only were these lines that were at 33 degrees and 303 degrees lining up with Wallowa Lake, or that were, running clear across or hundreds of miles or thousands of miles from across the earth, but they specifically lined up with each other. They were actually intersecting at Wallowa Lake. I was like, gosh, that's really, like, my jaw dropped. I'm like, why are all these energy lines seem to go right to this very small area here where there's just one lake and there's just a few mountain peaks out in rural eastern Oregon? Well, I started studying the area a little bit better. I was already familiar with Chief Joseph to a degree, but this is an area that experienced a lot of trauma. There was people that had their land taken from them there, and they were pushed out, and they had to leave. And I think when you've spent a lot of time building an area and it's close to you, and you're forced to leave, that trauma stays anchored in the soil, the same way that the reason why they perform sacrifice on hilltops or whatever else, they also do in these other areas that have energy centers, because they literally have understood that the interaction between your blood and your plasma, both as the actual fluid form of it and the etheric form of it as bioplasma or chi or orgone or prana or whatever you want to call it, it all has an effect on the earth grid and structures reality, specific to the locations where it occurs at. So as I was running these lines and I was seeing how they lined up, what I started to do was place pinpoints. As you can see on the map here, I placed pinpoints between locations like that where they lined up, so they would cross in to the area, and they would come in from different regions, sometimes thousands of miles away, all into this little area. And the intersections of them I placed pinpoints at. And I started noticing that beginning at the Mount Howard, at the very top of the peak, then leading down to the tower that I helped construct and design, then back up to Wallowa Peak, back up to Sacagawea Peak, then to Anaroy Mountain. Okay, that formed the center of this Fibonacci sequence spiral. And then I saw that it moved on to where the Altai region of Russia has a rock structure that is known to be an energy center, where it's very, very heavily charged with energy, and it has an influence on the grid globally. And it had an alignment with the Bosnian Pyramid as well as the Richland Free Masonic Lodge. All three lined up to that specific pinpoint. Then I moved on to the next part of the Fibonacci spiral, and it was my
Hey, I just want to say something really quick. So I did this article a long time ago, but just recently I did two presentations that articulate the Altai pyramid relative to Nevada, as well as the other thing that I mentioned there. There's two presentations that I've done recently that explain this with more video. And if you guys are interested and you haven't seen it yet, just give me some indication in the chat and I can play it tonight as a part of this presentation because it would be relevant if you're curious to see this idea, not idea, but this concept, if you want to see whatever this is in a more visual way that helps you understand it better. This I kind of give a general overview, but I get deeper into it. And like each one's only about 11, 12 minutes or so. So if you're interested, just let me know in the chat and I'll play those after parts 10 or 11.
Childhood home, also crossing with the Bosnian pyramid at 330 degrees. Again, these are always lines that are either 33 or 303, or if they run in the opposite direction, it's 123 and 213. But it's always the same numbers, okay? So how does this structure our reality? Nearly all these numbers are part of the Fibonacci number, which goes 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 5, 5, 8, 8, 13, 13, 21, 21. And so this pattern is in the Nautilus shell. It's part of sacred geometry. It's basically in everything, okay? And so when I moved on to the next point, it was, again, lined up with the hug point pyramid looking structure, and that's an area where I got engaged when I ran a line towards it, and that lined up to my birth home as well. So it also lines up at the actual hug point with my birth home. And then when you go in the other direction of the other energy line, it lines up with Wallowa Lake. So again, my head was just like one, you know, I couldn't believe it. And then it lined up again with Mount Tabor, which is in Portland, Oregon. And then there's a reflector wall that I noticed that was nearby also that I had a marker on that it lined up with too. And when I placed all these pinpoints down, it formed the Fibonacci spiral. So to me, I started realizing that, yeah, this pattern is in everything. It's in nature, it's in the shell, it's in the nautilus, it's in everything. You'll find this pattern in repetition constantly. And then I started asking myself, well, how did this happen? Well, I think a part of it was just simply that I just experienced such strong emotions surrounding that were mostly loving, that it seemed to me like it almost was this combination of the love I felt, the strong sense of, just feeling good and being happy. That was something that I experienced there, but I'm also conscious and aware that it's an area that's heavily charged with this trauma. And I started thinking about that as a yin and a yang a little bit, energy, clockwise, counterclockwise, things like that. And I was really tapping into something that is forming the fabric of life and what we exist in. So when we think about this term, thoughts become things, and earth energy relative to human energy, I guess what I'm trying to do for people is to help you understand, and maybe I'm not explaining this well, but I hope I am, that we are in fact lined up with these matrix and ley line grid energies. They're all across the world, and there's people that really do understand this deeply. They exploit those energy lines and those pyramidal structures oftentimes for negative purposes with negative intentions, or they'll do things in aid of creating distractions just to either malign those monuments, change their energies, or eradicate the monuments that exist that are providing those energies to the earth grid. And a lot of those energies are healing. You'll hear people, for example, that go into the Bosnian pyramid and they gain their sight back. That was like, they don't need their glasses suddenly, or they've had backaches and things like that, and suddenly they don't feel it anymore. These are the types of reports you hear. Okay, and that really affected me. I'm like, wow, I've been so focused on these things involving the Fibonacci sequence relative to like the zodiac crimes that then I got exposed to a whole different form of how this has been impacted. And it was mostly just through that sense of pride I had in what I was doing when I was doing it, or the relationship that I was in and how good I felt about that, about my partner and what we were accomplishing at the time, that these all had an impact on the energy grid. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. And so when I became aware that this is more than just some, new age concept or something that people say to feel good, that it's actually a practicable, I guess you could say, you can actually do energy work at these places where if you meditate and pray, or you just simply you exist in love, or you focus on and you concentrate on as a collective group, or even just one other person, it's the strength of that energy and how much it feeds into those energy lines relative to the pyramidal structures, which radiate globally. Your brain waves are extremely low frequency. Extremely low frequency can travel for thousands of miles and make multiple trips around the globe. Okay, all ELF can do this. And so while we're all focused on the negative aspects of these technologies that involve ELF, I would just like to remind people right now, especially, that you have an enormous ability to affect things for the better by tapping into the concept of the Fibonacci spiral, sacred geometry relative to the Nautilus, and by genuinely feeling love and acceptance and putting that into the area that you wish to change things in. And one of the reasons why people will constantly try to throw you off of that, or to try to make you feel negative, oftentimes, the ones that are high level, I guess you could say, energy workers for negative outcomes, they will try to steer you away from this informational set and try to get you angry, or to try to prime you to be hating instead of loving. And so I learned that there is a spiritual battle that's going on right now that involves energetics and bioenergetics that is 100% real. And the people that know this are really working to keep us in that negative mind state, and they're going overtime right now, especially. So using this as an example, just to examine this slide, and I want to remind you that, again, this spiral formed by me studying pyramidal energies globally. They come from areas like Bosnia, Russia, places that I was growing up, like Woodinville, Washington, places that I lived, like Portland, Oregon, coastal locations that I spent time on with people that I cared about and loved, that are near, like Astoria, Oregon, Hug Point, Manzanita, the coastal parts of Oregon. And then how all of those lines that intersected from those areas, combined with the energy work that's done through Freemasonic lodges to charge those lines, however they do it, that when you combine that with their intersecting points, which were things like Wallowa Peak and Sacagawea Peak and Anaroy Mountain, those are energy centers that all intersected seemingly by random, but did they? That's what's so trippy about this to me. And it felt like such a miracle. It felt like I get goosebumps thinking about it right now, that I really understand now. And I hope that others will understand. And I hope that if this piece doesn't do it, that the ones I'm going to do soon will explain it better. That we understand the power of simply holding each other's hands, looking each other in the eye, accepting each other, loving each other, hugging one another. I want you to think about how that feels when it's happening. And I want you to focus on that love the way that I have, and how good it's made me feel historically. I mean, it's always made me, especially some of the people that I experience this with, like they loved me in ways, or they respected me in ways, or we got along in ways like I've never had with any other people in my life. And I experienced that in all ranges. Sometimes it was a coworker, sometimes it was my partner, and it all affected this area. And I'm like, wow, that's really heavy. That's amazing. And as I became aware of that, I really wanted to use that for good and focus on that and maintain that loving vibration to affect all the areas that I go to. And I now understand why these spiritual leaders, these people that have had, you know, got people like Gandhi, for example, or there's people that just sort of just encourage this acceptance and love. And some people thought that is weak. And I would argue that it's well, like they say, love is the province of the brave. Wasn't that the same man? It really is. Love is the province of the brave. And if you can overcome challenging circumstances where you're being provoked into hatred, provoked into anger, and just try to find somebody nearby that you care about or that you love or that you're capable of, or even just reaching across the aisle to somebody to say that you're going to try, it just has an amazing effect on the earth energy grid, and it can change things exponentially for the better. And I'm going to get more into this topic and discuss the energy lines, I think, in greater detail another point. But I just wanted to leave you with that thought a little bit to tell you that when you see people that are just doing things that are more in the spirit of dancing and celebrating the moment, those are the strongest people out there. Those are the ones that are really having a strong effect on the energy grid, and they're tapping into pyramidal energy. They're tapping into ley lines, especially if they do it in certain locations. And they are your spiritual warriors. Those are the people that are in the fight for love, and that's what's going to bring us to peace. That's what's going to bring us to mutual respect. It's going to solve a lot of these problems exponentially. It really can, guys. And I'm a 20-year radio frequency engineer. Okay, I don't believe in things just to believe in them or because it quote feels good. I measure it. I go out and find the readings. I go out and learn the truth. And when I went out and measured things and started learning the truth, I realized that this is 100% true. Energetics is everything. And it is a spiritual battle, but you don't have to think of it as a battle, because it's really fun to stay in love, to be in love, to express love, to hug each other. And there's nothing wrong with that, even if if you're facing some really serious circumstances. I would say do whatever you can right now to use this energy to affect things globally. I'm going to remind you, especially in Washington, D.C., there's an obelisk called the Washington Monument. If you look into my other research, you'll notice that that obelisk has an alignment at 33 degrees, and it goes to Moscow. Trippy, right? The capital of our country lines up with the capital of Moscow. To me, that's just amazing when I think about that. That's a country clear across the world. They were built in completely different times, right? And structured out, yet they still have an alignment at 33 degrees. And then when I was studying the Bosnian pyramid, I was finding similar 33 and 303 and 330 type alignments. So a lot of people want you to believe that that number has some other connotation, and it has been repurposed. But I'll also remind you that it was used by ancient civilizations to do pyramidal alignments, and that right now, if you understand that, and you know how to tap into pyramidal energy and earth energy and ley line energy, and you can do it in a loving vibration, feeling it genuinely, sing your favorite song, dance with each other, and affect the energy grid for the better. Do it, think of it as a spiritual battle to spread that love and that acceptance around the world, because you have the power to do it. And especially when you
remember this part right here, guys, because that's the Washington Monument in DC. All right, that's the Washington Monument in DC, and what I'm telling you is that's an obelisk that has energy radiating from the Earth grid, and they're showing you what it's doing in the etheric grid. Again, constructed by Freemasons. So they know something, guys. There's no harm in studying what they understand at the biofield level, because, well, they wouldn't be doing this all across the world if it didn't affect the energy grid. So it's just a matter of there's good Masons and bad Masons, however you want to say it, just like there's good people and bad people, good plumbers and bad plumbers. So, you can call a lot of knowledge from them and learn a lot about this exact topic by just understanding what they're doing with that number, if you don't let people just automatically convince you that it's about like all the negative things that are associated with it. So it doesn't mean that you got to be one. I'm not one, and I'm not going to be one, but they know something. And if you study their lodges and you see the way they align, or you look at their monuments they built and you see the way they align, you'll know it's not any coincidence. And then you got to ask yourself, what do they know? What have they been using? Well, I can actually, and if you're interested, guys, I will play that Altai to the Nevada thing, or I can play you the one about the Tomsk pyramids in Russia that are aligned at Diomede Islands, because effectively, like in Tomsk, they've done something nearly identical in modern times. They placed the pyramid in Tomsk, Russia, and it lines up. If you wait a second, it lines up very similar, like it goes from Tomsk 33.33 degrees, and it goes straight through the Diomede Islands, Little Diomede and Big Diomede. If you know what that is, that's the border of Russia and America. So just like this one in Washington, D.C. aligns with an obelisk pretty close, not exact, but very close to another obelisk that's in Moscow. Well, guys, just like one microwave can aim at another microwave, they're linking, they're communicating. And so there's an energy balancing thing that's going on relative to us in Russia. Whether or not somebody planned this or whatever, I don't know. But I think what it's going to wind up doing is through these grid alignments, it's actually bringing us into greater balance. And we're actually witnessing it happen currently. You're actually seeing things balance out globally. That's why the media is going to such great lengths to program it with negative intention and negativity all across the board. It's all bad. It's all bad. It's like, no, guys, when you see what all happens as a result of everything that's going on right now in the world, you're going to realize how illusory much of it was and how close we are to this ascension. We are so close to having this heavenly plane here on earth. And I promise you, I would not be saying that ever in a million years, especially after the crap that I've been through for the last 5 or 6 years, if I did not completely believe it and feel it all throughout my body, every part of my soul and heart and everything. I'm telling you, we are on our way. This is happening. And it's because a lot of these things are aligned. Whether it was done through negative intention or positive matters not any longer. The alignments exist. Human energy is changing. What we're doing with our brainwave, the awakening that's happening with so many people, it keeps traveling around the globe. It's tapping into these monuments and it's bringing about ideological balancing. Okay. It is. It really is. You just have to understand how it works a little bit for you to have faith in it. Once you do, it'll be unshakable. And for me personally, yeah, I'm convinced. But anyways,
discovered with what's called a meridian arc that is about a little over 5,400 nautical miles from the Altai Pyramid in Russia to Lake Mead, Nevada.
I did a whole thing on that.
Probably the first thing you're thinking, if you're 99% of the people, is what the hell is the Altai Pyramid? And so it's a naturally formed, well, hypothetically, a naturally formed
you all get together
structure,
and you agree to do it.
Altai territory on the Baschalaski Ridge in Russia.
Oh, sorry guys.
About my pronunciation.
It just occurred to me. I started playing that article. All right. Sorry about that. That was unintentional. Hang on. Okay, this one I was just showing you was pretty much over. It was in the last minute, and then all I'm doing at the end after I tell you about the Washington Monument in Washington D.C. being aligned at 33 degrees with Moscow. It goes pretty much right to the outskirts of Moscow, not that far away from where they have an obelisk over there. I just don't think that these things happen whether you thought it was through God or it was God working through man. It's just strange, guys. Things were done so far apart from one another. You have to ask yourself how it happened, especially back then. But to me, I feel like there's some grand design that was placed here to say that no matter what man tries to do to F things up, the universal plasma field or God will correct it at some point. And so many people have a belief in the Bible. It doesn't really matter anymore how true or false you think it is or isn't. Anytime thoughts become things, you get a bunch of people all around the world that believe in something, it begins to manifest. And so it's true and it's not. It doesn't matter. Just like this earth, it's not flat or round. See, I get angry emails from people saying that I'm promoting one thing and I'm not. I'm telling you it's all a projection. Now, getting you to perceive it as a big ball, okay, now you have a point. You have a point. But at the end of the day, it is all perception. It is just one big universal plasma field. And then for us to actually like keep ourselves from floating around and everything matter, like KRS-One made a point about this. He's like, if this thing didn't exist, like I could talk to that chair over there and it would just stand up and walk around. Kind of like that, guys. Like it's a really good presentation. If you've ever seen somebody asked KRS-One if he was a Freemason, and he goes like, well, first of all, I'm not a Freemason, but let me explain what I know about it. And that it's a super deep conversation. It's only like about an 11 or 12-minute clip, but it's very, very good to watch sometime. I get copyright struck every time I try to show it to people anymore, so I gave up on that. But if you can find it, I would recommend watching it sometime just to have a better understanding, because again, he kind of goes into the whole conspiracy community thing, but then says, okay, but here's what I know. He gives you a really good direct answer to a bunch of people that are going, hey man, are you one of them? And he actually helps you understand the concepts a little bit better in ways that I borrow from liberally. I mean, he does have a lot of good metaphors and things that he knows about the lore. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and go straight into number 11. If you guys are interested in seeing the Altai Pyramid one that I just discussed, I'm going to put a link into the chat. And this is the one I did that explains the meridian arc better. And it talks about, our alignments to these other countries and ways that actually explain the concept with video, so you can visualize the points on the map. It's hard for me just to put a one single slide up and just tell you. It's better that you kind of watch the map move and see the different points relative to one another in Google Earth. So that's what that one does that I just posted in the chat. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch over to part 11 now. And then this is the end of the series as far as what I've gotten up to till now. And then afterwards, if you guys have any questions or anything else like that, feel free. You can add them in the chat here, and if I need to pause, I will. But otherwise, I'll wait till the end. And after that, if you want to see things that dig into this concept about how thoughts become things and these map alignments work between using that 33-degree number, I can totally do that at the end of the presentation as a sort of like a, what do you call it, an appendix, or what do they call it, an addendum? I can't remember the name of it, but like supplementary material that validates this better. And I've done it recently, so you'll either find it in my video section recently, or I can play it in this presentation. I'll leave it up to you. All right, on to number 11. This one, oh yeah, let me explain this one first. All right, so this one is all about the biofield. I won't read the whole description and everything like that. You guys, you've already seen the description if you watched or if you opened up the clip. So this is part 11. This is the last one that I've done in this series. It's in the energetics series. I'll probably be doing more though soon, like an energetics part 12 soon. It's kind of forming together in my mind right now. So this is just everything up until that point. All right, and on to it. Trying. Okay, there we go.
I just want to talk today about the system involving GDV, gas discharge visualization, and EPI, electrophotonic imaging, and why it's a method that I've been discussing more recently. I've actually been researching this for, I don't know, about 5 years now. When I was first going through a lot of the archives at the Freedom of Information Act library at CIA.gov, where I found a whole series of articles that referenced Kirlian photography. And most of these articles are written closer to the early 70s, somewhere in the 80s, but most were close to the early 70s and involved research that had happened decades before and were more or less summaries of things that they were concerned about relative to politics and the Cold War, meaning to say that this was intelligence that they were gathering about the Soviets, the Russians, relative to what they knew about biofields and what they understood about electromagnetic fields and scalar technology, and also what they knew about energetics as a general field. America at the time did not have that sophisticated of a knowledge of energetics. I would argue that maintains to this day. And that's kind of a problem that we have. And so what piqued my interest was just the sheer number of articles that had been declassified And so today, beyond just showing you, I've shown you recently like the camera itself. I've given you some demos on it and why I'm interested in it. But I wanted to show you folks that this is not something that I'm interested in merely because of whatever. It's not just because I think it's cool or it's visually impactful. There's a whole series of documents that back this up as to why it's a relevant method and why even today there would be reasons to suppress it, just because simply that there's groups that would prefer to do things involving human energy concepts differently than the direction that others in the world are, which is to say that many of us have learned that we would like to go into the positive spectrum of energy, and we don't wish to engage in sort of the negative energetics, which is a way of, I guess you could say, of using psychoenergetics and psychotronic signatures and behaviors and weaponry devices, scalar technology to change the behaviors of larger populations in ways that are nearly undetectable to them individually. These are very subtle changes, and it's in the field of psychotronics. But there's also things that you can discuss as far as people's biofields and energetics that can validate the human biofield and why it's important for behavior to be changed relevant to human energy concepts. And so I don't want to get too deep into that concept, except just to show you and just read to you some of the things that I've seen here personally that are compelling. So this is from the Controlled Offensive Behavior document that the Defense Intelligence Agency released in 1972. I will put all the document numbers in the description, but reading from page 33, part 6, it says, as mentioned above, the Soviets seem preoccupied with the search for the energy that carries or facilitates telepathy transmission. Is it electromagnetic or not? The search for this unknown energy has led the Soviets to Kirlian photography, named after its inventors Semyon and Valentina Kirlian. The Kirlians developed a technique of photographing with a high-frequency electrical field involving a specially constructed high-frequency spark generator tuned up and down between 75 to 200,000 electrical oscillations per second. Their first photographs showed turquoise and reddish-yellow patterns of flares coming out of specific channels within leaves. A magnified picture of a finger showed craters of lights and flares. By the 1960s, research on bioluminescence revealed by Kirlian photography was going on in many Soviet universities. Perfected techniques of photographing the play of high-frequency currents on humans, plants, and animals, as well as on inanimate matter, have set the Soviets on some striking discoveries about the energetic nature of man. Bioplasma is a term coined by the Soviets for bioluminescent phenomenon or energy. Scientists at the Kazakh State University at Alma-Ata have found the illnesses tend to show up in advance as a disordered play of flares from the bioplasma long before they manifest in the physical body. According to Ostrander and Schroeder, the Soviets may be attempting to link Kirlian photography with computers, among many other things, to instantly analyze the spectra of colors appearing in the varicolored flares from the living body. Effectively, folks, what I'm explaining to you here is that's exactly the system that I'm using. It is linking computers to Kirlian photography to analyze the spectras of colors in the living body. And that's what you see in this illustration. And you can't see it here, but they actually had them in the declassified documents, an example of it. I just wanted that there for historical context so you could see it. But then we go on to page 35, and it says, it is believed that if there is any positive basis for Kirlian photography in the bioplasma body of humans, the Soviets may be closer than is thought on the controlled use of the Apor techniques and possible astral projection phenomenon. Very important to understand, folks, because it demonstrates that there's a scientific basis behind.
Yeah, they know all about astral projection. That much I know. And it's not the reason why, guys, here, I get frustrated with the United States, the Western and nations in general, their denial of these things and completely intentional malignment of understanding to it, disinformation as opposed to enlightenment, going out of their way to go, this doesn't exist because it's being weaponized against you from people here. people in this country use this against people in this country and then tell you, Gaia, Mother Earth, none of these things exist. We're going to make it all look goofy. We're not going to talk about it scientifically. It's all about, I hate that. I'm trying not to go negative here, guys, but it pushed me so far away from getting the truth because of the gatekeepers, especially on some of these bogus new age channels that just like they give you like about 70, 80, sometimes even 90%. But the part that you really, really need to get it, they always omit, twist off into la la land, or just take way too much time getting to till you get frustrated and go like, just give me the freaking information. So here's the information. I mean, it's really here. These are numbers. This is data. I'm showing you measurement devices. I mean, how much do you want to see? How convinced do you need to be? Because I have a helionosis. I should show you guys that in the documentary too. I also have a helionosis life meter that does analog forms of these exact types of measurements here. It does exist. These are very, very real things because before a building becomes a building, it begins in the biofield. All right. And so if you can think of that color projection there, if you could actually visualize that when it's around the body, when it's actually happening, then what you have to remember is once you take that biofield there, which is this 3D color projection being emitted from your pineal gland through all the chakra system going, all right, that waveform travels over 22,000 miles. It's known, it's scientific. So when you get that part, all right, that means it travels the circumference of the earth. How powerful are your thoughts? How powerful are your ideas? How much does thoughts become things truly exist? That is the science of thoughts become things. Okay. This is within a trinity of human energy. This is the non-physical, non-visible. But before you even get to that human body you see in the center, it all began as the man and the woman who, wanted each other, believing in one another, feeling one another, loving one another, or just lusting one another. And then that vibrated their child into the mother's womb, where it becomes a replica of everything we exist in because it's receiving brainwave to actually model the womb. That's why it takes on the form that it does. The baby in the womb is literally all the continents within the chakra system are all represented in every part of the baby's body. And then the shell that surrounds it's the ocean and the earth. It literally creates a duplicate of the earth within the mother's womb. Do you get that? Because that's human brainwave that creates the earth. Therefore, it's human brainwave that creates the baby in the womb, making it the shape that it is, the form that it is. It replicates us, and we are the earth, and the earth is us because it's all done through God's source, the universal plasma field. So you can believe in both at the same time. In fact, this pretty much makes me believe in both at the same time. I no longer see belief in a higher power as something that's like weak or stupid or done by somebody who's ignorant. No, you have to be ignorant to deny. If you ask me, you haven't done your research. No offense to anybody there. I'm telling you as a person that used to go like, whatever, but not anymore. No, once you see it enough times in practice, you measure it, you know it's true. That's all it takes. Anyways.
The link between plasma, bioplasma, the biofield, what we exist in as physical matter versus, other more esoteric concepts of the plasma field. This is a validation of that what occurs within the plasma field, your thoughts become things aspect relative to your bioelectrical field are extremely relevant, okay? Especially when it comes to the field of psychotronics and how your behavior changes relative to frequency. So part 8 says, Dr. Podshabjakin, excuse me for my pronunciation, an electrophysiologist at the Institute of Clinical Physiology in Kiev, has found that by charting acupuncture points, a correlation exists between the bioplasma and changes on the surface of the sun. At the exact moment solar flares, sunspots occur, there are changes in the electrical potential of the skin's acupuncture points. These electrical charges are measured by a toboscope, probably a simple Wheatstone bridge device. In some way, the bioplasma of the body is sensitive to these solar explosions of the instant they occur, even though it takes about 2 days for the cosmic particles to reach the earth. So again, suggesting that the humans respond to the geomagnetic conditions created by the sun and the moon, full moon madness, right? All these things involving psychoenergetics. Are we impacted by the moon? What is it that does that? Well, that's a electromagnetic effect, folks. I mean, think about it. It's geomagnetic in nature. They're demonstrating that when the sun changes, the moon's conditions change, so do geomagnetic conditions. And as a result, so does the electrical field in the body. You can literally, you would have to take that into account if you were measuring your biofield to understand, like, am I changing my biofield relevant to the geomagnetic conditions? Is there a full moon? Is the sunset? I mean, all of those things would matter as well as where you are geographically. Part 9. The most significant use of Kirlian photography is in the area of psychokinesis or mind over matter. Dr. Gennady Sergeyev of the A.A. Ukhtomsky Military Institute in Leningrad believes Kirlian photography may uncover the mechanism of PK. Sergeyev is a prominent mathematician for the Soviet military who works closely with an electrophysiologist from the University of Leningrad, Dr. L. Pavlova. Sergeyev has devised important mathematical and statistical methods for analyzing EEG electroencephalograph, which allowed parapsychologists to follow and depict the actions of telepathy in the brain. The type of work reported by Sergeyev in 1967 and 1968 is just now beginning to appear in the U.S. efforts to understand the transmissions of telepathy. Sergeyev has conducted several years of intensive lab research on the outstanding PK psychic in Leningrad, Nina Kulagina. Illustration 4 is a photograph of Dr. Sergeyev, and illustration 5 is a photograph of Ms. Kulagina. Sorry, I don't have the photographs here. They're not, you can't see them. They don't appear on the document. Sergeyev registered heightened biological luminescence radiating from Kulagina's eyes during the apparent movement of objects by PK. Sergeyev postulates that the bioplasma of the human body must interact with the environment to produce PK. Sergeyev emphasizes when target objects are placed in a vacuum, Kulagina is unable to move them. Barkas in the United States reports some unusual occurrences during psychic photography, especially of the eyes. Reportedly, Kulagina has caused the movement of wide range of non-magnetic objects under strict scientific control: large crystal bowls, clock, pendulums, bread, matches, etc. In one test, a raw egg was placed in a salt solution inside a sealed aquarium 6 feet away from her. Researchers report she was able to use PK to separate the yolk from the white of the egg. Observations by Western scientists of Mrs. Kulagina's PK ability has been reported with verification of her authentic ability. The same Western scientists have reported that as of February 1971, they have not been able to visit or observe her. A veil of secrecy has been placed on her and Mrs. Kulagina for unknown reasons. Rather than simply observing PK, the Soviets typically turned to instrumentation. I'm trying to think if I should read this part here, guys. I think I'm going to go on to the next part here because this is deviating a little bit from the core topic of Kirlian photography. But I want you to see that, folks, because you can see there's a connection between psychokinesis and the electrical flow, geomagnetism relative to your bioelectrical field, and how these things are quantified and measured, okay? And why are these things here in the West typically, concealed to this day, folks? I mean, this was written 1971, it's 2021 here. Let's think this through a little bit. 50 years later, and we're still hiding this in the West for the most part. I mean, yeah, I have one, but how many people know about it? Okay, moving on to a new document here. This is from a completely separate one that I located that's called Articles X and Y from an Unidentified Journal. I'll put the document number here. This just gets into what the Soviets knew about Kirlian photography. And again, this is a separate document, getting on to another one. R. Stepanov, Doctor of Medical Sciences Professor. Discharges are diagnosed. Correct diagnosis of a malignant tumor may be given only if during the operational, hang on really quick here, let me make sure I have this. Okay. Yeah, let's just start here. So it says, since 1967, work has been going on in the surgery department of the Kuban Medical Institute on the utilization of high often frequency photography for the diagnosis of precancerous states and cancerous tumors of the stomach. Together with ST Kirlian and V Kirlian, a procedure has been developed for obtaining high often frequency photographs of sections of some tissues taken from patients that are being operated on. In order to compare the results obtained by the Kirlian method with other methods, we carried out simultaneous histological and histochemical investigations of these same sections. The results of the investigations convinced us the fact that a clearly defined difference exists between high often frequency images of normal and cancerous tissue. The principal advantage of the new method compared with well-known methods is in its expeditious nature. However, because of the cancerous tissue can be photographed immediately after the operation and therefore does not have the time to change significantly, it is possible to study the physiochemical properties of this tissue under the conditions close to the conditions in the living organism. According to the characteristics of the channel of the high often frequency discharge, their geometry and energetic for a deviation from the norm, one may evaluate not only the extent of the tumor process, but also the dynamics of the malignant growth. And this is of a very great significance in precise diagnosis and consequently in the therapy of cancer. And then it goes on to say, no author listed. The principal distinguishing feature of photographing in a field of high often frequency current is this is basically, when they say high often frequency current, they're discussing GDV Kirlian photography. What I'm discussing here is a method. There is also no need in illuminating the object during the photographing process. Therefore, it is very convenient to use the Kirlian method to obtain photographs of surfaces to photograph by means of conventional camera. They proposed a special elastic electrode with a light-sensitive layer deposited on its surface. This simple device may be inserted into any cavity in a contracted state. It is then filled with a current-conducting liquid and connected for a short time to a high-often frequency oscillator. It allows that one can obtain a latent image of the entire inner profile of the cavity on the light-sensitive layer. The electrode, after having been removed from the water and retracted from the cavity, is again filled with the same quantity of liquid, developed and fixed. The three-dimensional photograph that is obtained provides a possibility of detailed evaluation of the electrical state of any spot on the investigated surface. So again, this is just kind of giving you a broad overview of Kirlian photography as a method. Leading on to the next page, bioenergetics and Kirlian photography, an original healing method, biostimulation with a beam from a low, often powered laser, has been developed at the Kazakh State University by the Doctor of Biological Science in Yushin and his associates. Hypertension, bronchial asthma, and other illnesses that are difficult to treat can be treated successfully by this method. For a rapid evaluation of this physiological state of patients under laser biostimulation, natives of Alma-Ata have developed a special installation whose principle of operation is based on the Kirlian effect. The bioenergetic processes in the entire organism, when it is acted on by various physical factors, are evaluated quantitatively on the graphs. A new express method for evaluating the physiological state of a person was used, not only in medicine, but also in biology. What are the interesting facts that biologists have been able to discover? It turned out that the intensity of the luminescence is maximal in young plant leaf and minimal in old ones. And at the instant a leaf is torn off, an abrupt flare of luminescence followed by a rapid attenuation is observed. However, if a plant is placed in a constant magnetic field, then the luminescence intensity decreases, while the duration of the attenuation increases by a factor of 2-3. Under these conditions, the effect of the reduction of luminescence as a result of the reaction of a magnetic field is preserved for a long time, even in a case when a magnet no longer acts on the living tissue. It is the expressed evaluation of the bioenergetic state of living organism is not only the advantage which attracts biologists and physiologists to the Kirlian effect. The new phenomenon which have been discovered still await their explanation. And so then they give you a series of articles to read. And then I'm going to leave you with this last one here. It's just sort of a general article that they were studying because they were concerned obviously about what the Soviets had as an edge at the time, being the Cold War. And so they were collecting all this information and keeping it in their archives. And so this one kind of gives you a general history of Kirlian photography. And says this wide range of comment concerns a novel of photographical processes now stirring controversy among American scientists. Kirlian photography, invented in 1939 by Russian researchers Semyon and Valentina Kirlian and introduced to the United States 3 years ago, produces startling photographs of pulsating multicolored lights streaming from the human body and from plants. Psychologists, psychiatrists, biologists, and physicists, as well as investigators of psychic phenomenon, are looking into Kirlian photography, also known as radiation field photography, as a new way of observing energy fields associated with living organisms. Unusual experiments are being performed throughout the United States and Russia, with remarkable claims being made, many based on little information and attained under loosely controlled experimental conditions. However, reputable American scientists are now attempting to improve testing conditions to better evaluate the phenomenon involved. The subject poses frustrating pitfalls for anyone attempting an objective and independent evaluation. Little of the research has been published in the traditional scientific literature, and only a relatively small number of scientists have firsthand knowledge of it. Those who are experimenting often seem to disagree on even the most basic points, and a certain amount of verbal gobbledygook by some of those who have described experiments or presented theories has made it difficult to sort out the legitimate scientific aspects from more metaphysical matters. Nevertheless, there seems to be enough to the subject to merit some serious attention. The Kirlians report that their electrophotographs show certain points on the human body radiating light flares more forcibly than the areas around them, and that these points correspond exactly to the 741 acupuncture points mapped out by the ancient Chinese. It is also reported that they have produced photographs showing that a plant is diseased before the physical symptoms of the disease appear. Soviet investigator Viktor Adamenko, who has worked with the Kirlians for many years, claims that he has been able to cut off as much as 10% of a leaf and still produce a photograph that shows light emanating not only from the portion of the leaf remaining, but also from the missing section. Adamenko suggests that there are so many energy sources in a leaf that cutting a small section away does not significantly reduce the ability of the leaf to maintain its energy pattern. American scientists have been unable to obtain the same result. In the United States, material scientist William A. Tiller of Stanford University and medical psychologist Thelma Moss of the University of California in Los Angeles have produced photographs of freshly plucked leaves revealing light patterns surrounding the leaves that become distorted if the leaves are mutilated and gradually disappear as the leaves die. They speculate that this emanation may be a direct measure of the life processes occurring within living organisms. Repeated experiments suggest that light emanations around fingertips vary with the emotional, physiological, and psychic state of the person being photographed. Moss has photographed the fingertips of a medical student before, during, and after the consumption of 17 ounces of bourbon. The emanations around his fingertips became increasingly brighter and rosier after each consecutive drink until he became all lit up, and shortly thereafter, ill. This experiment has been repeated by Tiller and psychiatrist Gerald J. Jampolsky of the Child Center in Kentfield, California. The results corroborate those of Moss, whose more puzzling are photographs taken of fingers of faith healers, persons who claim that they can cure illness by touching others. Often the person being treated by a healer reports a heat sensation in the area of the body touched. Pictures taken by Moss show that the glow around the healer's fingers is smaller than before healing, while the patient's emanations increase in size and intensity after healing. It should be emphasized, he says, that this phenomenon does not demonstrate healing. It simply seems to reveal a transfer of energy from healer to patient. This is but a small sample of Kirlian photography experiments going on in.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that because really fast, not too long. What they just said is kind of important to understand because if you can see those flares and they say it doesn't necessarily mean healing, it just means the energy's transferred. You should be conscious and aware of who's doing that for you. their intentions and what kind of person they are and what vibratory feeling or sense you get about them is very relevant because it'll affect your biofield. So just because energy transfers from their hand into your body and it's something that's a measurable thing doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. It doesn't mean the energy is compatible. This is what I'm trying to get, like, even if I can, what I'm trying to do is get like more equipment, brainwave, better Kirlian photography methods on top of the BioWell and the helionosis meter. That's where I'd like to take the research, is a little bit closer to studying this aspect through those methods, and identifying when the energies aren't just flaring, but whether or not they're compatible. Studying when a person actually does feel good as a result of this versus what happens when they were like, well, I felt something, but I don't necessarily feel better or whatever. Well, I think that's a thing. And I think your level of trust with the practitioner who's practicing the healing matters a lot also. Again, it's a very psychoenergetic process on top of being something that's biological. There's a lot going on here in the brain and the heart relative to how that energy is transferred and how the person receives it. And then you have to be discussing it at the orgone level too, based on Wilhelm Reich's research with, are they transferring positive orgone radiation? Are they transferring DOR radiation? Is one pulling one type in and transferring back out the other? I mean, these are all factors that I think are well worth exploring. But the whole point of this wasn't that. It's just to say that the intention of the person providing the healing and what kind of human they are is huge in this. So don't ever forget that, especially if you're into these types of things and you just think automatically like, well, I like that person because they can do this or that. Well, even if it does provide relief, you still have to be conscious and aware of the person's belief systems, their thoughts, their values, because it affects your biofield. You're integrating into your biofield. Think about that a little bit, because that's science there.
The United States, Russia, and to a lesser degree in England and South America. The simplicity and inexpensiveness of the Kirlian apparatus has encouraged experimentation by bona fide and amateur scientists alike. In general, the American photographic devices are modeled after the Russian ones, but differ from one another in power source and experimental range of voltage and frequency used. In the simplest Kirlian device, the object to be photographed is placed on film between two metal plates to which voltage is applied. For taking pictures of a portion of the human body, only one electrode metal plate is needed, since the body acts as a ground. In other cases, a transparent electrode is used and the film is placed outside the apparatus and the camera. Often a Tesla coil is used with the device. It is plugged into an electrical outlet and in turn rigged to the metal plates. The Tesla coil multiplies the voltage and the frequency of the electrical field. If the current is of high frequency, it travels over the surface of objects rather than through them and is thus safer to work with. The exposure time depends on the film speed and the strength of the discharge current. When the current is tuned on in a darkened room, rays of light are readily seen issuing from the object's edges. The light is recorded by the film. Radiation field photography is not a new discovery. It dates as far back as Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil. With the coil, he made photographs showing sparks emanating from various parts of his body. At the turn of the century, an American and a Czech physicist also experimented with electrophotography. Again, in the 1930s, American physicists studied corona discharge. However, little attention was paid to these photographs until the Kirlians accidentally rediscovered the process. Most earlier scientists felt that they were dealing purely with a corona discharge. The Kirlians were the first to consider the patterns of luminescences as life activities. In Living Things, the Kirlians wrote, we see the signals of the inner state of the organism reflected in the brightness, dimness, and color of the flares. The inner life activities of the human being are being written in these light sorry guys, there's a little bit of a cutoff here, hieroglyphic. And in order to write these hieroglyphs, to read them, we're going to need help. Sorry, it's cut off. So hieroglyphs, I think is what they're saying. American interest in radiation photography was triggered 3 years ago by appearance of the book Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder. They've also been quoted in the Defense Intelligence Agency report. So let me see here. I think we covered most of the relevant material here. Let's see. All right, guys. So I'm going to leave the rest of these documents up for you to review, and I'll put the entire thing up here. I'm trying to think if there's another section here that you may find relevant to. Yeah, okay. Here's another part I think that we should. I'm just going to skip to the middle of this next part here. It says Richard Miller, a physicist and director of research at the Department of Paraphysics and Parapsychology at the Experimental College in Seattle, is not convinced air ionization is the main process in Kirlian photography. He thinks the radiations are related to normal discharge of gas from living organisms. With photospectrometry, Miller and his colleagues have looked at the emission lines coming off human body and have identified them as gases related to the phenomenon of pheromones, gases that contain communication signals like odors. Guys, now we're getting into gases that contain communication signals. Okay, that's biofields, that's bioplasma, that's everything I've been talking about. Now you're getting into concepts involving the collective consciousness and the bio-internet. That's just my additions there. Okay, so much human emotional interaction could depend on the exchange of pheromones, says Miller. Of course, this goes on at a subliminal level, below the level of conscious awareness. Gas emissions are functions of the emotional state and are potential clues to what goes on inside the head and may lead to accurate measure of human response and health state. The Kirlian process gives us a handle to measure these states, concludes Miller. Both he and Tiller agree that careful experimentation under well-controlled conditions is needed to evaluate the significance of this phenomenon. All right. And that's most of that document. I didn't want to read the entire thing, guys, because I mean it's pretty long. But I got through most of that there. All right, so let's go through the rest of this here. It says whatever it is, Moss says, I'm interested in it because it reveals enormous differences in energy states in individuals, and thus may have practical applications for treating diseases, alcoholics, for psychotherapy, and for studying the discovery of Kirlian photography to be as important as the invention of the X-ray machine. X-rays show what goes on inside the human body. Kirlian photography reveals what goes on outside the body. I'm so glad this says that, guys, because I've been talking about the human body as a trinity of human energy. That you have the skeletal structure, that's what the X-ray covers. You have your physical body on the outside, so you have your physical non-visible, that's X-ray, that's what's going on inside. You have your physical visible, that's what's covered everything by your normal doctor and what you normally address. But what happens to your biofield? What about your aura? It's relevant because it speaks to what's going on internally. It speaks to what's going on inside your body. Okay. And so if you learn more about this biofield, if you learn more about this discharge, then yes, you're going to learn more about what's happening inside the body because it all vibrates down in as much as it goes out. You understand? It's a transmit and receive pathway that's going on here with this biofield, and you need to know what goes on in both directions. Ending this document, it says Jampolsky is planning to take photographs of fingertips of children to see if he can determine when a child is daydreaming or actually concentrating on his books. He's also planning to do some work with dying patients to find out how long emanations continue after death and if the photograph will reveal when a patient makes the unconscious decision to stop living. Kirlian studies of persons in a hypnotic state show that unconscious decisions do affect the aura. Researchers James Hickman and Larry Amos of Sonoma State College in New Mexico are planning to take photographs of fingertips of normal and abnormal persons at a nearby mental hospital. Preliminary studies with Kirlian photography, Hickman says, indicate that it is possible to detect emotional disturbances. Says Moss, at this moment in time, it is impossible to draw any conclusions about this research except one. Whatever these pictures reveal, corona discharge or bioplasma, the changes which have been observed to occur in organic materials demonstrate that a most interesting, still undeciphered story is being told. And there lies the challenge. All right, so that I wanted to kind of finish on, folks. I know that's a lot of documentation. I've been going on for almost a half hour here, but you really, I'm gonna end with some charts here. I'm gonna kind of show you some things that I've learned in studying this. That everything that you just saw, and I've been using this camera for a little while now, about a month and a half, I'd say I've had this thing. And I am absolutely convinced that the Kirlian gas discharge method is valid, that it has definitely some tangible data points. The whole reason why I've been even considering this method from the beginning was because I found all of this documentation on the CIA.gov's library and the Freedom of Information Act library. And I can give you all the documents numbers here. I'll put everything so you can locate it yourself. You can do your own research on your own. But yeah, I'll remind folks here, if you're interested in this method, I am available to do these types of measurements. And you know, if you're just curious about it, you can inquire. The descriptions are down there below. You can contact me. But yeah, for me, I don't buy into anything. I don't accept anything as a concept unless I've researched it for a long time. And what compels me about this is that it's just been so suppressed. It seems to have been so pushed back and marginalized. You see them kind of saying that it doesn't work on Wikipedia, or that it's, you know, like, well, we don't really know. Well, guys, I mean, is that true? You honestly believe that? Knowing that I found this documentation where you see the Defense Intelligence Agency was concerned, you see the CIA, the Army, they were all writing like report after report that have been declassified now, saying that we got to know what's going on with this Kirlian photography, guys. There's something really huge here. We really got to figure this out. Well, there you go, guys. I mean, it is. It's very relevant. Your biofield is relevant. What you do with your biofield is relevant. And, you know, these things are all important to keep in mind. You have a trinity of human energy. Please keep this in mind, okay? You have your physical non-visible, your skeletal structure, your physical visible, and you have your biofield. And this is the part that I'm wanting us to focus more and concentrate on. I'm available if you would like to learn more about this or to consult with me. Again, my details are in the description below. You can email me, contact me about this. But I really think this is a fascinating field of study. And if you're interested in learning more, please contact me and we can talk. Have a good day.
All right. So that's the material 9 through 11. And I don't have enough time right now, guys, after all of that to do the Altai Pyramid in Russia articles right now. But I just posted them in the last week. I mean, it is some of the latest material that I've done. So if you go into my normal material, it's the Altai Pyramid one, the Tom's Pyramid one. And that's when you're really going to get like this supplemental material that bridges part 10. So part 10, I talked a lot about like those alignments at 33 degrees. You can see video of it if you watch those clips independently. And hopefully like seeing those 3 sections will help you understand like what you see in the other ones. Like what helps me sometimes is like I'll watch a clip a few different times at different intervals. Like I go back and get some other knowledge or schooling, or I see somebody else's material. And then I sometimes even watching my own, then I learn like, oh, wow, that's a piece that even I missed. And it was right there in front of me. And I saw it in my own presentation, but I didn't even point it out, you know, or sometimes other people point it out. I mean, it's weird that way, but yeah. So I've been talking in the chat here for those who don't see the chat. About they were asking about what I'm using or whatever, and if it's a camera. So I just want to be clear about that, guys. The BioWell is not a Kirlian camera in the classic sense. It doesn't really do that exact process. It's a form of it called GDV, gas discharge. And what it's really doing, guys, that thing that you see me, I'm placing my finger against a plate, and that plate is the gas discharge aspect of it. And so it measures each finger. If you're going to do a full biofield reading of a human, you have to put all of your fingers inside the machine, and then it goes, you don't even feel it though. It takes like a snapshot photo of the biofield on your fingers. And from that, because all, you know, like Reiki, healing and that kind of thing, that because so much can be measured from there, it can give you a full view of what your biofield is based on the ping signal against the electrical plate that goes against your finger. You don't feel anything. There's no sensation to it at all. I mean, maybe you might, but I don't. You know, different people or whatever. And then the Sputnik probe is something that I use to do environmental readings. And so I can go into Again, these are things that you really have to have a very strong understanding of what you're doing, I think, for it to have value. And it's taken me like a year to have a basic understanding of those things. And I would say that where this camera really, or not, sorry, it's not a camera, where the BioLGDV system really is remarkable, I say, or has value, is in creating comparisons of energy readings relative to a human's energy reading and the environment that they're in or the environment that they may be affecting, because it can do readings over time. So I can take, for example, that GDV camera and then place a Sputnik sensor into it. And that sensor is just like these little spikes on a ball, and they go all around. And it takes subtle energy readings across the pins of the Sputnik sensor. And so any sort of slight changes, like if a person has a lot of energy and they enter into the environment where the Sputnik is, like, or they experience trauma or rage or anger, or like a strong emission of love or even orgasm or whatever it is, these are all things that push a lot of energy in one direction or the other. They can accumulate energy and they can project energy. And so the sensor is really valuable in actually deciding, like, okay, do I affect the energy in a room? And then you have the water sensor. Okay, again, do you as a person, when you interact or send intention to the water or focus or concentrate on the water, are you able to change the way the energy is inside it? And then it's valuable once you have a whole series of comparison data sets. But if you're expecting to like know something right away by looking at one reading, I wouldn't say it's good for that. It's something that you would really want to have like a good sample of a lot of different places. So if you're doing an environmental reading, you'd like want to say, okay, what does the inside of a house look like compared to the outside yard? And measure each one for about the same amount of time. And then you can look at where one sits versus the other, but nothing spits out and says, that's good energy, that's bad energy. It's a lot is open to interpretation, and it kind of helps to have, to bounce the data back and forth between other people and compare your data against other people's data. And there is a big community behind this whole BioLGDV system. The inventor, Dr. Karatov, has actually worked with Professor Emoto, if that interests you. So what I'm telling you is, those who understand Professor Emoto, that's pretty huge. I mean, I've done tons of material. In fact, I really should focus a lot more of my material on water frequency and that kind of thing. And that's probably where I'll go with it soon, if not next. But yeah. So you guys understand. Yeah, it looks like the Sputnik sensor looks like a mace or something like that. It's like a weapon. I mean, it would be dangerous. Like if somebody was trying to F you up, you could really go and hurt them with the Sputnik sensor, but you would damage it. But yeah, guys, the guy who invented that camera has actually, I could show you. I wish, I don't have time right now, guys. It would take me too long to find it. But if you do, God, I wish I had that available someplace easy. Anyways, Dr. Karatov, the inventor of that camera, did a study with Professor Emoto where they brought in a group of people. They did a water ceremony with Professor Emoto, the actual Professor Emoto. He was physically there. It's in their whole research study. It's a very cool thing. On top of it, this same system, and on top of the other thing that I use called the Helionosis Life Meter 4, both devices were used to collect a series of data sets at the Bosnian pyramids that are known to have healing properties. And again, guys, why do you never hear about Bosnian pyramids except on channels like this or a few other fringe places? I mean, it's because they always want you to take the typical perspective of a pyramid was a king and queen tomb. They always program life energy, positive orgone radiation concepts with death, burial. And in all actuality, the point of those things was to extend life, to project energy, to share energy in a benevolent way in many cases, not always. Some of those pyramids, especially the ones down in Mexico, did not work. I got this from Valery Uvarov, one of the Russian researchers that I've learned an enormous amount from reading his books and research. And I'm telling you, like, that if you can ever, I've actually linked to it. He has an article called The Mechanics of Negative Energy. It's on his Pyramid Store or Wands of Horus, I can't remember which one, website. It is such a brilliantly written article. about how some of the pyramids over in Mexico, for example, like they didn't construct them properly and they knew it. And the only way you can get a non-functioning pyramid structure that should be a radiator of energy meant to commune with the gods or whatever is above us, if it doesn't work, there's only one thing you can do, is turn it into an accumulator. If you can't turn it into a radiator of the energy and actually project things out, they turn it into a vacuum of energy. And then that's where the whole sacrifice culture came in. That's why they used to have those things painted red and all these other things like that. People would gather in the court and then watch sacrifice. And then they would get fueled and charged by it. They would get color primed with red and like, grr, grr, grr. They painted the whole thing's red and did blood sacrifice rituals. Why? Because they learned that that's how they could replace the gods here on earth. They literally were creating this sort of Luciferian satanic ideology by making massive accumulators of energy. So CNN, the MSNBCs, all these different media organizations, they know these secrets. They don't report on them for a reason, because they are energy accumulators. They do the same thing with media. All right. That's why we never see these researchers. That's why people like me don't have their information spread far and wide by these organizations. They won't invite me typically on those places because it will mean the game is over for them. I will explain exactly how this works, and then you're going to be like, well, why am I even watching this channel? So that's why I'm happy to have the people here that I have here, because honestly, like what you guys do is, if it resonates with you, then we hive together and our thoughts become things in an exponential fashion. I like that I draw in that very rare 3% of the population that just gets it. They're super delegates of human energy. And then when we think of the same thing at the same time, and that brainwave travels 22,000 miles or whatever around the entire globe, merging with all the other biofields, that's how we create awakening and awareness. And that's how we actually bring in ascension. That's actually how ascension is happening. It's because of this process. That's why we are in the ascension era. It is why we are ascending right now. It is. It's because we are understanding it. We're actually owning the process finally as the human condition. I believe this is what God wants through the universal plasma field, is for us to actually honor our free will, what we contribute to the universal plasma field, to know that we're not just here to wait. We're not just here to sit there and go like, well, maybe it'll happen. No, you make ascension happen. Okay. You do it by believing, by helping others understand it. And I don't mean false belief. I don't mean belief in something that is non-tangible and non-real. I mean, it's actually understanding it for what it truly is. Everything vibrates into physical resonance. All your ideas, your thoughts, your values, when they merge with everybody else's biofields, you're really onto creating something. And they don't want you to do that. They want to accumulate your energy, keep it for themselves, and then when they project it back out, it's all just like, now give us more, because they're guys, don't even hate them. They've become intoxicated with this energy. A lot of those figures, they need your forgiveness on some level, because that's what's going to bring us into this ascension era, is understanding that they're just people. They got in the DOR loop. They've become energy accumulators, and they're having a hard time getting out of it. And sometimes they just need to be inspired out of it. They need to be loved out of it. And maybe that's our role here sometimes, is not to turn the other cheek, but to energetically understand what our power is and to not give it away to these people. See, we have to create our own media organizations. We have to build our own pyramids. We have to create our own groups and things like that, so that we can, amplify this ascension and really get it going. It's already going, guys. It's unstoppable, but we'll get there a lot quicker, the quicker that we all, understand it. So, well, I really do appreciate you joining, folks. I do have to get going here. And I really appreciate your viewership. Thank you much for joining here. And again, down in the description, you'll find links to contribute if you'd like to help out, so I can get more test gear and just pay the bills. I would really appreciate that right now. It would be a huge benefit to this channel. Yeah, I will be back with more material, some other presentations I'm going to be doing some reviews of too from the past that I'm going to show you guys. So anyways, thank you. Have a good night. God bless. Ascension now.